Well, thank you for joining us for TPUG. We really can't emphasize enough how much we appreciate everyone's support. And if you please subscribe to the TPUG YouTube channel, and then you could find events and the contact information for these types of events in the TPUG homepage announcements. But definitely come and subscribe to Man Behind the Machine, my podcast, where I do rebroadcasts of TPUG meetings for audio. And our special guest today is Dave Bradley. So I'm going to get to talk to Dave, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A. Um, so we're going to get started. So Dave,
Sure.
thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, and I love the phone on the on top of the stack of magazines.
It's a
And the
Commodore
wall
phone,
of
of
pets.
course.
Yeah. Great to see you. I have to, commend you on the wall of pets there. It's like I meditate on that wall.
Yep. When I was putting them up there, I almost had an avalanche, but not, and they haven't moved since. And
No.
now I kind of had one, and then things started to shift, and then just a little, but it was scary for a moment, but I got things okay, and they have not put up a fight ever since.
So Dave, you're one of the longest running members of TPUG, and I'm curious, even before TPUG, if we could go back, where are you from and how did you get interested in computers?
Oh well, I'm from Toronto, and the first time I ever really saw a computer was at the high school I went to, Northern Secondary, and I was walking by a room, and there were these guys in there, and they were playing Space Invaders on a pet, and I
Space
thought,
Invaders.
ooh, that's kind of cool.
Mm.
And little by little, I found out more. There was a club in the school, um, and I got involved, and could also stay late after school and work on. We didn't have a whole lot of machines at the time. There was just a few. Eventually, there were labs and labs and labs of them. But I remember sitting in the back of this room next to the card hopper for the mainframe with a pet on a cart with a data set, watching the magic as it said loading, searching for, saving, and that's where it all got started.
Yeah, and then where did you meet the TPUG guys? Was it at a high school or?
Yeah, the first meeting I would have gone to would have been at Leaside High School, which is where the first meetings were. I wasn't like in on the very first, because the very first weren't in a school. I think they were in somebody's basement, but I don't think it was long before they headed off to Leaside High School, and I'm not sure how we found out about it. But off we went, and hardly missed a meeting after that. And I mean, eventually there were meetings all over the place, but that was the first one, and I remember the magic of watching. There was a fellow, his name was David Hook. He was a librarian. If you brought a disc to the meeting, you could get the meeting disc copied onto your disc, and there was always on the stage behind him there was a computer and maybe two or at least three 4040s. So throughout the meeting, he was making all the copies, and there were speakers, and it was well, those were the magical days.
The magical days. I wish I had like a synthesizer effect. I'd do like a magical sound right now. Magical days. No, it was. No, seriously. There's no joking about that. That was a magical time, right?
Well,
Where you could.
everything was brand new. Everybody showed up and they discovered something, or there was, uh, I mean, all kinds of things now that. Well, I mean, when I first started doing computer things in high school, we were using punch cards, and that was to show us the way it used to be. And then suddenly we were in with the pet, which is, well, this is how it is, using a data set.
I see the smile on your face when you talk about data set. It brings you a lot of joy, huh?
That's how we started.
That's how you started.
Yep.
So you counted 32 pets, right, behind you?
I think that is an accurate count in here.
Okay. So for everybody who's watching, yeah, there's 32 that we can count for.
There are more that aren't in here.
More, yeah.
I'm not sure the exact number. I know there's 3 on the pool table right now because I had one that smoked, and I've been trying to sort that out. And I
Oh
think
no.
there's 3 or 4 more upstairs in the TV room. I think maybe the real count might be 43 or 44. But I lose track.
Lose track. And how many disk drives do you have there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got like
Oh,
9 in one row, but
oh no,
behind you.
but that goes right to the floor. No, that there's 2 stacks. One of them has 10, one of them has 11. But once again, there are more.
There are more. That
There
meets the
are.
eye.
I think there are. I think there's at least 7 more that aren't here.
Okay. So I am proud to have given Dave the nickname. You want to know what my nickname for Dave is? Leaning Tower Pet. Look behind him. Hello, good evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. For those of you who joined late, I'm talking to the man. You know, like I said, subscribe to Man Behind the Machine. He's the real man behind the machine. You seriously. I mean, 8-bit man, you're the man behind the machine.
He's the
You
man in
know?
front of the machines.
Yeah. The man in front of the machine. Well, he's kind of behind him, right? Do you have like a system to the right of you there that you usually broadcast from?
I haven't done stuff in here for a while.
Okay.
I'm mostly upstairs, but I've started to do a little recording at a table in the front hall where I've been working on other things. And I just, after years and years and years, I cleared off the pool table. And that's where I was going to test disk drives, but then when I had the pet basically go up in flames, or
Oh,
near
gee.
flames, then I dragged a couple other pets in there to try and resolve that. But there's also upstairs, there's another room called the box room. And
Oh.
I've got to get back to, I want to get where I can tinker in each one a little at a time and have a bunch of things on the go.
You know what it's like? Okay, I spoke to Dave many times recently in the past year, and I just feel like we need to talk more. There's always stuff that I don't get to ask him about. So I want to delve into what's going on with your recent focus. What's your recent focus? Repair or
Well, it all, a lot of it is. I mean, I well, certainly on the pet that burned, I think I'm going to actually end up sending that one away to a fellow in Wasaga named Rudy, because monitors and I don't get along very well, and certainly this monitor had some smoking issues. But the board is okay. It may just be that the power supply has finally given it up. But there's all. I mean, I'm always. What have I been? Well, I've been working on the pets, and there's always other disk drives, and I mean, I say there's 40 some pets. Well, when it comes to Commodore 64s, I really don't know how many there are. I have no clue. It's not as many.
but
More
from
than
what
50, less than 100.
but from what we've talked recently, you've been harvesting some of the C64 and other, models for your pets or
Well,
vice
yeah, I
versa.
mean, okay, here's the thing. I never try to get more. but things happen. Like there was an ad a little while ago. There was a fellow who was clearing out stuff for his uncle up in a place called Seabright. And I thought, gee, I think that's close to my brother. And so I checked, and yes, it was. And then I got in touch with the guy, and I thought it was a couple of things. I was wrong. There were, I've lost track of even how many. I think there were 6 or 7 big 20s and 5 or 6 64s and 3 monitors and some printers. Like I thought I pretty much got it all in when I opened up another box that I thought was just another monitor to check, and it was another printer, another 64, another disk drive. So once again, I try real hard not to get anything else, but sometimes it just doesn't go well. And most of them worked fine. Most of them, not all, but most of them, and a lot of it was. I hadn't really looked at VIC 20s for a while, so it was an adventure. And also, I found actually it's funny at the World of Commodore this year. I had recently got a VIC 20, which of course I try not to do, but I did.
Oh, nice.
And I brought it there, and I thought, well, I'll open this up and have a look. Well, sure enough, the circuit board wasn't like anything else I'd ever seen. It ended up it was an early Japanese model, and I didn't even know it existed, but I did talk to a couple of people there who had seen it, and then since then, in the big batch of stuff that came from Seabright, there was another one, and then I did the fellow I picked up the pet that eventually went up in flames. He sent along a circuit board for a VIC 20 that's had some scavenging going on, and sure enough, it's another vintage um, VIC 20 board. And the way first of all, the way I knew it was different is the configuration of the chips was completely different, but also there was no little cover or there was no box hiding the VIC chip, no shielding, no anything. And then I did notice on the side of the two of them there were little stickers that basically said, "Oh, by the way, this doesn't really, the FCC stuff isn't really up to date on this." And I thought, oh, gee, look at that. So anyway, I guess they were the very first ones. And then, of course, I came upon something else I hadn't seen, or I thought I hadn't seen, which was the smaller, cost-reduced version. That when I did start to open up more VIC 20s and tinker, I found, oh yeah, I've had some of those. I just never bothered to look at them. So anyway, I in when I was getting into these things, I started with the PET. I moved to the 64. I kind of bypassed the VIC 20. The 22 columns didn't really do it for me. But of course, over the years, things happen. So when I was in the pool room tidying up in there were some boxes at the end of the pool table that I thought, oh yeah, there's maybe 4 or 5 VICs there. I should look at them. And of course, there were 9. So I've been going through them and figuring out what's working and what's not. So that's.
And what are those magazines underneath the telephone right there?
Okay. Well, a while back, I saw an ad, something I think it was in St. Catherine, and there was a fellow who had a bunch of stuff, and including, but not limited to, magazines. And some of them were original transactors, like before it became out of Commodore. And then there was another one. I think it was called the Pet Gazette, maybe. But then they weren't allowed to call it Pet Gazette because I think Commodore said, "Oh, you can't do that." So then I think it was known as the Gazette, and they took the word "pet" off of it. But I think it's a complete collection of the whole bunch of them. And then of course there was hardware, and there was at least one C-Link for the 64, and then there was some weird 64 that was all, I don't even know what somebody had done to it, but they were what they were trying to do. So it was just a whole bunch of stuff, and I thought to myself, if I don't just say yes now, it'll be gone by morning. And so late at night, I got in the car when the traffic was not so bad and drove all the way down. Oh, there was also a whole lot of tapes for the pet. And some of them were also from the Pet Gazette or the Gazette.
Oh,
so little by little, I've been going through them, and most of them seem to be. Anyway, it's just, once again, I try very hard not to get anything, but sometimes.
This is what he prefaces almost every one of our conversations with. It's hilarious. The guy who doesn't want anything, happens to get it all.
No, it's a lot of stuff. I try not to look, but once in a while, things happen. They do.
So how much of your software has been backed up? What percentage?
Not very much. That's one of the reasons I was going to start working on more of the dual drives, because I did a while ago go through a bunch of the 4040s, and but there's a lot of 8050s, and there's even some 8250s, and I kind of got sidetracked. So the 4040s I worked on, the 8050s I haven't done much at all with, or the 8250. So right now I've got to get them out of the stack there, and one by one take them into the pool room and diagnose them. But then, of course, now I'm in the midst of sorting out the pet that fried. So that has kind of thrown me off a bit. But we'll get there. Actually, there's another thing I just found. See, when we ran the bulletin board long ago, there was a fellow, he was involved in TPUG, his name was David Williams, and he came up with some ROMs that made the bulletin board pretty much indestructible in terms of power failures and other things. Yeah. And so it would basically, if you turned the pit on, it would automatically boot up, it would load, but more than that, there was a routine in there that if no one was on the board, the machine would sit there. You could see a thing running off in the corner, and as he said, it was looking for cosmic rays in case anything changed in the machine, that it would say, "Uh-oh, something could be going wrong here," and it would reboot. Anyway, I found just today the pet that had the BBS ROMs in it. Now the machine is not working, but I don't know why. But it has the ROMs, and first thing I did when I opened it up, I said, "Oh dear, they're EPROMs, and they're not covered." So I did find some stickers and covered them and marked them, because of course EPROMs will erase. But I figured they should have been safe in a dark pet for 40 years. I haven't had a chance to explore them, so I don't know what's wrong with the pet, but it'd be interesting to find out, especially if the auto boot things are still working, because they went that we never shared that. We didn't think anyone else would be interested, really. So, and I think David Williams used them on he had a bulletin board for a while. Anyway, I'll see what I find when I.
So in terms of archiving, what do you suggest? Can Zoom Floppy archive PET as it can Commodore 64? Or do you use Grease Weasel?
I'm not. You know what? I have not really advanced much into the modern world. So I really don't know. I do have an SD card reader.
Okay.
And I've used it a little bit, but I really haven't got into the I haven't ever. I don't think I've ever put anything on the SD card or downloaded.
What are you using the SD card reader on? Which model?
The one I got works on both the PET and the 64.
The same one. Okay. What's it called? That particular one?
That's a good question. It kind of almost looks like a tiny 4040. Okay. I'm not, and there's a menu and sort out which you want to do IEEE or the other drives, but there's connectors for both. But as I said, I really haven't used it much, and I think I have another one or two SD cards. I just really haven't explored them as much. So really, when it comes to all the backing up and archiving, I'm sure I'll get into it, but it's not. I'm not. I don't know how. You know what? There's some things with the SD card thing. I look at them. I said, I don't even know how to get into them. Not yet, but I will.
Yeah.
Yep. I still like the drive and the spinning of the disc and the sounds and the grunts and groans and the head banging.
That's interesting that you mentioned Space Invaders on the Pet. Is it true that that's one of the best games ever?
Um, I think it was pretty fine. Actually, as I've been going through a bunch of discs, every time I see another version of the Pet Space Invaders, I set that disc aside in a pile because at some point I want to look and see because a lot of the TPUG discs had the progression of the versions. And it's funny, one of them I played, I don't know, some months ago. I thought, oh, I'll give this a try. And it had some other feature where just out of the blue, some more little guys appeared. And I was like, what is this? But I guess that's it. Oh yeah, it was very good. Um, and as I say, that was one of the things. And in those days, of course, we'd head off to the arcade. But I thought, well, this is kind of good. I don't have to go to the arcade. I can just play it at home. So it was good. Like the little guys, the little creatures did not look really uh, identical to the arcade version, but they didn't care. Just played the game. And was I particularly good at it? No, I
What are
would
your
say
what,
so.
what are your other the top five favorite games on the Pet that you could
Um,
recommend somebody?
there was a very good Monopoly game, and it was
No
eventually
way.
ported over to the
Really?
64. Hmm.
Cool.
Yep. And
Okay.
what else did I mean? The games I first started on were some of like there was one called Artillery where you try and figure out the angle and how many bags of powder to lob. And but this was just right back, back in the school days of let's discover things, see what's what. But I really wasn't ever like a a gamer thing. You know what? A lot of us did back in the day. We get the programs from TPUG and other places, and we sort of look inside and steal things. Like, oh, what's that routine and how does that work? And
Right.
snag it out. Oh dear, there's somebody named Richard Bradley.
Yeah, somebody said they couldn't join because it was asking for a code.
Oh,
Did anybody else have any problems getting in?
I used the link
No?
at
Okay.
tpug.ca, so I don't know what everybody else tried.
Okay.
it tells me on here Richard Bradley has raised his hand, but I don't know what to do about that. Ah, okay. He wrote something. The best Space Invaders he ever saw was written by Troy Hacker of Richfield Telecommunications. And yeah, Troy Hacker was quite something. He was. I haven't been in contact with him, but he had the perfect name for a computer nerd. Um, but yeah, he did some great stuff while at Richfield Telecommunications. I don't know if people know about that, but that was run by a fellow named Peter Smith, who, like Richfield, I don't know how they all came to be, but I mean, if you needed an element for your oven or a pet, you could go to Richfield Telecommunications in Richmond Hill. And I guess, anyway, it was an interesting place, and he was an interesting character. He usually wore kind of we call them Mr. Green jeans because he wore these coveralls. And that's where we got our first pet.
And what was that day like? What did you remember doing that day?
Bringing it home and just going at it. And actually, what we didn't keep that one because he said we actually rented it, and he said you can bring it back within, I guess it was 90 days, and they would apply the entire rental to the purchase of a new pet. And so we showed up on the 90th day, and that is when we got a 12-inch um, 4032. And that was one that, eventually ended up running. I guess it was probably running the first bulletin board for a while. That was actually, we ran the bulletin board out of the school, but then over the summer it was going to be shut down, so we brought it home.
Wow.
This fellow's Richard Bradley. He's raised his hand again.
Did you wait? So you brought it home. Did you start it up?
Oh yeah, we just ran it on a regular phone line. My dad wasn't too thrilled about that.
And where's the BBS now? Do you have an archive of it?
I'm sure somewhere in a box somewhere I will find the disc, but I don't know where. I recently found the original discs we got from Steve Punter for the PunterNet Node 13, which was for the Commodore 64. But the original like BBS disc for the PET, they're in a box somewhere.
What's this Node 13? What's this now?
Oh well, there was a thing called the PunterNet.
The PunterNet.
And that was where it was actually quite ingenious in that people who ran the same board software, in order to basically help with long distance charges and things, is that people from each board could send messages back and forth. And for example, when I was involved mostly more with motorcycle things, there was a fellow I knew in Markham named Big John and a fellow I knew in Bolton named Little John. Well, I could call them both locally, but they couldn't call each other locally. So I would put my call forwarding on. I would call and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you." Say, okay, I'd put the call forwarding on for 5 minutes, and they call. But the PunterNet worked the same way in that the boards, like if I had node 13, but if there was another node that was like, say, in Bolton, but a message wanted to go to somewhere that was local to it, then literally the nodes in the middle of the night would bounce these messages from one to another, avoiding the long distance charges.
Holy cow.
As best as possible. Now, there were some cases where it couldn't, but it was very efficient. So instead of like going on to something and typing a message and spending 15 minutes, to send whatever messages back and forth from board to board, it was usually less than a minute. So I as I say, I found those discs. I haven't checked them yet, but I will. But they're the original Node 13.
Are you keeping up? Are you keeping up with Commodore? Is anybody keeping up? Well, we're talking to Dave Bradley, and Dave, a few questions. Favorite ice cream?
Let me think. Chocolate fudge brownie.
Chocolate fudge brownie. Favorite 80s cartoon?
Well, I pretty much grew up on the Flintstones.
Okay, cool.
It was on every day at lunch when we came home from school.
Yeah, Flintstones. Nice. What about Inspector Gadget?
Oh, I from time to time, but I wasn't hooked.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
I think Star Wars.
Why?
You know what? I remember when it came out in 1977, and I think the first time maybe not the first time, but one time we went to go see it, the theater was closed because of a damn snowstorm, and that was distressing.
Wow.
It just, the effects, the music, the sound, it was the story, the blowing up of the Death Star. Yeah, and Star Trek was good too, but
I love R2D2. Your brother says, awesome. Hey, Richard. Thanks for joining us. Richard says R2. That's cool.
oh yeah, R2D2. Actually, a fellow at our high school, like the real R2D2 in the movie, there was a guy inside, but a fellow at our high school built one.
Man. Oh, wow.
That was actually a robot, although he controlled it remotely.
Did he use like a trash can or something? Or that was the
Oh,
joke.
no, it looked
That
really
was the
good.
joke. Look, hey, I love R2, man. Don't give me any flack. I'm the biggest Star Wars fan. I'm just saying that's the joke. That's a trash can. I'm just saying. Look.
Oh, it might have been. Who knows? That might have been the inspiration. But
Okay, so let me
and,
ask you this.
yep,
Any Star Wars games on the pet that you know of, or Star Trek games?
yeah, there were. Um, I'm not sure
Okay.
about Star Wars, but certainly in some of the TPUG discs, there was some Star Trek stuff where you could go around and from sector to sector, and it was kind of a little bit like that game, Battleships, where you go in and then you would have to pick a place to shoot at and have to enter the coordinates. But yeah, there was. I'd have to look it up and see
You
what.
know, see how I pivoted to Star Trek? Yeah, you should check it. See, I had to pivot. Why? Why did I ask this question, you may ask? Because I have a Star Trek game on floppy for the 64, and the graphics aren't anything that I think a pet couldn't handle
Hmm,
because it wasn't extremely complex. They're just text and some ASCII, right? Or PETSCII, right? You could accomplish a lot visually with PETSCII, right?
oh yeah.
Talk to me about PETSCII.
Well, I mean, it's funny that one of the first things we ever saw at TPUG of the Commodore 64 was the Commodore Christmas demo from 18. It might have been
Mm.
82. And when you look at it for real, like yeah, there were sprites and things in there, but most everything on the screen was made with the graphics characters. And but I remember being in the back of Leaside High School watching this thing on the great big green projector. And the part that got me the most was when, like, they were playing the song Frosty the Snowman, and then Frosty started kind of walking and dancing, and I was just blown away. But that was a sprite. But a lot of the stuff on the screen was just some of the characters that they just mixed together. The one I guess that was the most is they had one that kind of looked like a stained glass window.
Yeah, but you're right, right. So Commodore 64 uses a modified PETSCII.
Yeah, it was much. It was funny. I just got a message. There was a movie I helped with, and Richard was an extra in it, and it was called Hide and Seek by CBC.
Oh yeah.
And I finally found it again, and I saw there were some questions there, so I answered a few. But there was this one thing in there, and it was in the script about um, how to. Oh, it was like some life thing or something. And I read the description, and I was just baffled. I didn't know what the hell to do because I was writing the programs. I was like, I have no clue what this really means. So I came up with something that used a bunch of the Commodore graphs. Mostly it just looked like circles, but of different sizes and things. And really, I don't really think it fit what it should have, but they were pleased. So I said, good. I'm glad you're pleased because I have no clue what else to do. But there was a guy just recently wrote and said, well, how did you, it didn't have graphics. How did you do that? And I haven't quite answered, but basically I made use of the little O, the big O, and also some of the graphics to make bigger things that were just part of the character.
Yeah,
The most
what other common programs do you use for the pet? Either terminals or word processing or
oh well,
what do you
way back when
I,
it was word processing. But the first thing I ever handed in high school, I didn't have a word processor, so I just wrote a program that I would just type in the stuff in print statements and do my best to format it and print it out. And then, of course, the teacher I handed it into, who was Herb Worthington for electricity, he said he couldn't take it because it wasn't fair that I did it on a computer.
what?
And I said, well,
That's
at
like
the
computer.
time, yeah, but remember, this is back in, like 45 years ago, and no one was handing anything in type.
Right.
And so anyway, I protested, and then he went and checked with the office, and they said, yeah, it's okay. And it was on I think it was a 2022 printer, the old Commodore thing, which sometimes ran into trouble because, of course, it didn't really have true descenders on the small character. So sometimes people would mistake a small p for a large p and circle it like it was an error and say, no, it's just that's the character set. But anyway, after that, things were accepted, and now, of course, it's gone full circle. If you tried to hand something in handwritten, they'd probably say, "What's this? You got to type it." So that was anyway. But eventually, we got onto WordPro and then Paperclip. And for the bulletin board, I think we used WordPro to do the bulletins and things. And of course, way back when we had these bulletin board get-togethers, and even though Paperclip and WordPro were fighting in court, Steve Hunter and Steve Douglas, I mean, they were kind of stayed out of it, but their companies were fighting it out because WordPro decided to Paperclip and copied WordPro, which of course they hadn't. And I don't know how it all got settled, but here we had basically these guys at these BBS get-togethers in the midst of all this court stuff, and they seemed to get along okay. Mind you, they didn't sit next to each other.
What about these BBS? Sorry, BBS get-togethers.
Yeah, well, we usually be at a restaurant. One time I played tennis against Steve Hunter, but mostly it was every month or two or so we would someone would pick a restaurant, and whoever could come, and we'd go it. But usually they were pretty gatherings of I don't know, maybe 20 or so.
Did you guys ever have copy parties?
You know what? No, I was never really. It's not that I didn't have like stuff that was like, for example, we never bought WordPro, but we used it. But no, we never, never had those things where people bring all their stuff and they hide out in the basement and copy all kinds of stuff. Not really.
So, aside from the CD-ROM that we were talking about tonight on archive.org, how much of the TPUG archive has been preserved?
Well,
percentage-wise, in your opinion?
Well, I think pretty much all the TPUG discs. I think pretty much everything that was done. I mean, up to the point that they did the CD, everything's on there. I mean, really? somewhere I have the CD. I'm not sure where. It might be in this room. But I've really never, because once again, I really never got into the whole SD and all that stuff, much of anything. So I've never really looked at it.
And do you know where the most comprehensive archive of TPUG newsletters is? Are they archived somewhere?
I think they're pretty much mostly online. I think somebody scanned them and did the PDF thing on pretty much of it, but I don't know where. I know on occasion I've gone to look things up and found them. Mind you, I have a bunch of the magazines here. Oh, right. I forget if I can get this one out of here. Here.
Okay.
December of 1984.
And there it is.
That's the room
look at
at
that.
my grandmother's house where we ran the Bradley Brothers bulletin board system from.
Wow, look at you guys.
That's a while ago. And actually,
beautiful copy.
You can't really see it here, but
yeah,
the Harley Davidson flag that's on the cover. Where'd it go? Well, it's somewhere. I have it here. It's a little faded from the sun, but it's the same eagle. It's the same thing. It's the same one.
Yeah. Awesome. 1984. Yeah, that's the iconic photo. When I was trying to promote the event, I tried to find that photo. I couldn't find it on your page, but yeah, that's awesome. And what does it say on that? Do you know? What does it say on that issue?
Oh, let's just The return of our column, Super Pet Programming, beginners and just COMAL course, user port hardware, menu structuring, computerized forecasting, and much more. And
So
that's
that's
funny.
1984, right? So
December
that's
1984.
So where in the history of TPUG, in the in this current of PC computing, home computing, do people go from the PET to the 64? Did you not jump on that bandwagon right away?
Oh yeah, I have I've got a very low serial number Commodore 64. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, but
Oh,
I haven't tried to fix it. It was okay at the beginning of the 64. They just wanted to get them out the door. There was a horrible flicker problem,
oh, gee.
and it didn't last long. They did get it figured out and every Commodore 64 still flickers, but some genius at Commodore decided that, if we just have it flicker as the same color as the background color, no one will know.
Oh,
So Commodore was trying to get all the flickering ones back. I don't think I ever succumbed to that, and I didn't even realize. I just thought, oh yeah, well, flicker, who cares? But yeah, no, I got one when they first came out, and I think shortly after that was when the IEEE interfaces came out, and I guess for a while I probably used tape drive, but I see my brother and we got a 2031. That was our first drive. It was not the ones that looked like the 1541. It was the high
so
profile.
when you guys got the 64, what kind of compatibility? What were you guys doing to make the two systems communicate with each other at the time?
Well,
Were
you know what?
people writing like emulators for?
Uh, you know what? I mean, anything in just pure basic that didn't use anything specific to the pet would work just fine. Um, I mean, one of the first things I did is I came home and I started playing with sprites because we didn't have them on the pet. So
Mhm.
actually I did a thing that was just for show of how sprites were done and how you could do them, and showed it off at a TPUG meeting. And I remember Paul Hagenbaum said, "Boy, if you turn that into, because it was just really to show how it worked. It was a program that said, well, here," and I made, of course, a sprite of the Commodore logo, and then had it there, but then pressed a button and it showed all the ones and zeros and how it was broken up into things. And anyway, it was just mostly I played with sprites and just carried on with tinkering on things and getting more stuff and taking programs apart and figuring how they worked. Um, and I had it hooked up to a not an incredibly wonderful television, but it worked fine. Like I for a long time I didn't get a special monitor for it. I did actually somewhere in that picture on the magazine there was a picture of a green monitor. It's a Comrex monitor. It's still here. I think you can just see it past the telephone. Just just about there. Just anyway. It's kind of
What
it's
about
not.
asteroids for the pet? Asteroids.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I
So
I
that was
forgot about that.
ported.
It
Okay.
was quite good. Very challenging and very frustrating.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Because pretty much you'd stay in the middle and you'd have to watch out. And of course, if you shot an asteroid, they broke apart, and then they'd sometimes move a whole lot faster, and they would go off the screen, and then they'd come back, and you had to be ready to turn. Maybe you could move.
So basically any kind of vector game could conceivably be played on a pet, right?
Yeah, pretty much. As I say, I wasn't the biggest gamer, but it was always interesting. I remember when we were doing that CBC movie called
Yeah.
Hide and Seek, there was a big game on the go at the time, and I hadn't seen it now in 40 years, but it was called Aladdin, and it was the typical sort of a spaceship appears, and then there's ground underneath, and you just move along from one side to another, and you try and wipe out
Yeah.
the things that are there. But it was very, very good. They actually used it in the movie.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, Richard Bradley says you could connect them at the same time. Yeah. Right. Your
Yeah, but
brother's having a side conversation. He should come on. Should be the Bradley brothers. Yeah, so what about Space Invaders for Mule? Yeah.
oh, Mule, yeah. Now, Mule was a magical game. It's funny when that joystick came out that Jerry Ellsworth and others put together. First thing people asked is, "Does it have Mule?" The answer was no,
No.
no.
What about fantasy games like Dungeons and Dragons? Was
Oh,
that
they had.
ever put on?
Oh, yeah, yeah. There was lots of there were lots of TPUG adventure game discs and things. And
Oh yeah?
oh
Oh,
yeah,
sweet.
bunches and bunches of them.
Oh
But
wow.
you know what? I never.
Is that on the archive? Sorry.
Oh yeah, it'll all be there. There
Okay.
were actually special adventure discs.
Oh. Okay. Can you tell me
Uh,
more, please?
well, you know what? Not much because they weren't my thing. Some of them were pretty much contained, and others, if you look at the adventure disc, oh my God, there's dozens of sequential files that were used by the program.
Okay, so
So
now you got me interested to look at my disc that I bought from Joe.
but anyway,
Yeah.
they really weren't my thing. So I maybe I just didn't have the patience to sit there and say, open the door, pick up the knife. You know, it's funny. It's funny. I was just going to say, stab Steve Hunter. But I remember there was a great thing
You got
happened
that
at a
right.
meeting. There was a
I'm
meeting
wonderful.
at one of the TPUG meetings. There was Templeton. What was his name? It wasn't Brad Templeton. Anyway, someone had given Jim Butterfield a Comal machine, not Cobol, but Comal,
Come on.
and it's a whole other language, and pretty much the people who were into it were almost like disciples. And but anyway, they were showing this, and there were different commands, and you could also name routines. So I remember, and Steve Hunter was there, but he was talking about how you could name routines, and he did something. He said, "Well, we'll name this routine Punter," and did something else, and carried on, and said, "Okay," and then of course we don't run them, we execute them. So then Jim Butterfield, with a wry little smile, said, "So now we'll execute Hunter." And the place laughed. Another great moment I remember at the TPUG meeting was there was a huge, like, it didn't get so violent, but it was, the views were so varied on whether you should notch discs and use the other side.
Oh, tell me about the story,
Oh my God!
please.
People were. There was such controversy, and Butterfield was up there, and he was actually talking about things
Yeah.
about this, but it was just, oh no, you can't do that. It's only certified on one side. But see, looking back on it, yes, it was only certified on one side. But Apple used the same discs, and they had on their disc was a different side. So like ours wrote on the bottom, theirs wrote on the top, same disc. Anyway. But oh well, there'll be this cross through, and it just went on and on and on. And finally, we moved on to something else, and Jim was going to show something, and once again, he got that wry little smile on his face as he was looking for something. He said, "Oh, okay, I guess it's not on this." And then he just said, "Well, I'll just turn this over," and stuck the disc in. I'm not sure where he came down on the double-sided issue, but hang on, I got something here. Oh, look,
Oh, what happened?
it's a disc notcher.
Oh, wow, that was a big controversy, huh?
Oh yeah.
I have
We
not
didn't
seen one of those in a very long time.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Then I bet you haven't seen two of them. One
Wow.
black.
I
So-
don't think I've ever
Hey.
seen two in the same place at one time.
Hang on. Maybe that's all I have here. I know I
But
have some other ones.
what was Jim Butterfield's position on the matter?
I think it was basically kind of the safe thing of Well, if it's something you really care about, probably, don't, and, always have backups and such. But
Lots of
obviously,
people used to use a one of those punches you'd use instead of a
oh yeah,
three-hole punch.
oh yeah, no,
Just a hole
these,
puncher on the corner of the disc.
yeah, no, these things, they weren't available. No, these came out once the Commodore 64 was set, and the VIC 20 was selling millions and millions. Oh no, it was either you used scissors and you were damn careful, or you used, kind of like the bus driver did, is if you said a hole, like a single hole puncher thing, and once again you tried to be in the right spot and be careful.
I used the bus driver method.
I have you know what I've done at times, even before I could find these again, because I knew I had them somewhere, is you take another disc, you line it up backwards, and get it all just perfectly, and just take scissors and just ever so gently tweak, and then fold the other bit out and cut it off. So anyway, much as the diplomat Jim Butterfield was, I'm sure he said, um, you know, do it at your own risk. But then, of course, then he immediately, shortly after said, "Well, I'll just turn this disc over."
So one of the earliest of these pet fantasy RPG games was Dungeon Quest in 1979
That's
for pet. Have you heard about that one?
I've heard the name. Never played it.
Dungeon Quest. Okay, by Epix. Yeah, Temple of
yep.
Aspi, 1979.
Well, then there was the Scott Adams Adventures, and I think
What
they
was
were
that?
mostly Scott Adams Adventure games. I think
Okay.
they were mostly for the VIC. They're the cartridges that if you get them and you put them in, they don't do anything because you have to put in a sys command to make them run. And if you have to read the documentation, or eventually they did to start to put, to start this, put in the sys command. And I asked somebody, and because now actually on Facebook, I'm friends with Scott Adams. But I was asking somebody, he said, you know what? Those things were so tightly packed because they would run on a normal DIC, but they had extra RAM in the cartridge. He said they didn't have room to have it start on its own. So anytime you get a cartridge and even if it doesn't say the sys and you're not sure about it, it could be one of those adventure games.
So what's the sys number?
I don't have one handy. I don't remember.
Yeah, maybe you
But
can.
they were all the same. They were all the same.
Oh, okay. And can you give us some Jim Butterfield stories? Even if we've heard them before, you probably told me.
Well, it's a funny thing. One time, I was twice. I ended up while I lived in the States. I was asked by these people who were putting on a Commodore show to go, and they brought me there. One of them was in San Francisco, and one of them was in Boston. And both times, Jim Butterfield was there, so we met up. The most fun one, the San Francisco trip kind of got ruined because my first wife at the time decided she wanted to come along, and that didn't help anything. But Boston, I went on my own. She wanted to come, and I said no. But Boston, the show was great. And then in the evening, I hung out with Jim, and that was actually the time that he told me that his wife had attained pregnancy, and he was some older, and it was actually kind of funny because at that time there were three people I knew, including my brother Richard, and another fellow we knew who worked at a radio station in Toronto. His name was Bob Saint. He worked at CFTR, and Jim Butterfield, and their age range was significant, like quite significant, but yet they were all having their first child just about the same time. So I think there was some swapping of baby things back and forth amongst them. But he told me she was pregnant, and so like I have not seen his daughter in years because at one point, and I guess he got the idea that I was into this because Richard was. He called up and he said he had an old Chevette that he was getting rid of, and he wondered if I could help him, like, essentially scrap it. And I said sure. But Richard was more into that. But anyway, he called me and So I went and got it, and I did see his daughter then, and I don't know if she was even 10. I've not seen her since. I've not heard from her since. Now both of her parents are sadly gone. But that was the first time I'd ever seen her since I heard that while we were in Boston that that they were expecting, and it came as quite a surprise. But and
Well,
actually,
as I understand, in the 1980s, there was pet emulation on the 64, as I understand, right? There was only, like software only emulation, because
oh, probably,
the right?
yeah, I'm
Do
sure
you
there was.
remember?
I'm sure there was.
Okay.
I didn't use much of it. Oh,
So there was the pet emulator for Commodore in 1984. Then there was a pet emulator in Compute Gazette, and then some German magazines. Maybe Stefan, he's tuning in from Vienna. He could tell us, but yeah, some German magazines also published a pet emulator, in, and then there were custom built emulators for business software that were published.
oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it was always people doing. I mean, I really. Oh, hang on a second. I have a tat. Nope, I don't have a tat. She's gonna go. There was always people who wanted to. That was the one thing about backwards compatibility. Well, it wasn't going to happen with sprites and other things, but I mean, a lot of the stuff was pretty interchangeable as long as you didn't use something that was specific to. Hi, Penny, how are you doing? To the machine. Like that was one of the things TPUG did eventually. Is that I think if there was a program on a disk and it had the name of it, it was for the pet, and at the end of it said .z, that meant that it should work on any pet.
Oh,
Because it didn't have things specific. There was a program for the 40 column big screen one, or no, sorry, the 8032, and it came from Commodore that essentially compressed the screen in the middle of the 80 column screen that you could run pet things and pet games on 40 columns on your 8032.
did you say .z?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, it would. So if it was, if it said something like, chess.z or whatever, it meant that it had nothing specific to the 8030. It didn't need to like it anyway. Just it meant that there was nothing that would keep it from running on it. Like I mean, a great example was Jim Butterfield's copy all program, which would run on um, most anything. Like I've seen it on the test demo disc. It
Can
was
you tell us what this program is?
I mean, when you had a dual drive, you just back things up. But when you got to these single 1541s, you
Oh,
needed two drives, or well, no, there was a 1541 backup where you could swap a disk back and forth a whole bunch of times. Or there was on the test demo disc, there was the Jim Butterfield copy all, where you would have one is device 8, one is device 9, and you would set it up and say, okay, and it would take a while. It was not the fastest thing. It wasn't, any like hacker program or anything. It would copy the whole disk, one file by file by file, and which was a lot faster than the 1541 backup, where you
oh,
probably had
wow.
to swap the disk. Oh man,
Is
five,
that
six,
is that
five.
program available
Oh
still,
yeah,
or what?
oh yeah, sure. They were a lot of these things were on the disk that came with the 1541.
Oh, okay. And Jim did that, huh?
Oh yeah, it was.
Incredible.
Yep, it was on.
Incredible, man. Just
And
what a
see, then
genius.
there were other things on there, and I don't know.
Mm.
There was a program that you could change the device number of a disk drive because you could,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course, go in, void the sacred warranty, and put in a switch. Um, because if you had two and they were both device 8, you had to switch one somehow. So you would have to load in the program, run it with only one drive turned on, and while the drive was turned on, it would stay in the device number that you picked, and then you could run the copy from device 8 to device 9. But like dual drives were just, back up D0 to D1, and away it went, all within the drive. But once pretty much everybody ended up with single drives. And even now, there was a fellow, and he was at the World of Commodore, and he's come out with that dual 1581. It's not. I think it's still like one of them is device 8 and one of them is device 9. So the
Yeah,
dual.
I met him too. I met him too at VCF.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Are the most common PET formats .tape, .prg, .p00?
Or are you speaking a language I don't know? But yeah, I think so. That those are the things I've kind of looked at on the CD or the SD card thing I have, where I just say, "Oh, I don't know how to do anything with those." But yeah, I think those are them.
Well, the tape deck were .tap.
Okay, I believe it. I just
And the .prg is a program file.
Oh yeah, well that yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh, I thought you're okay. Yeah. Oh no.
That's
The
what I
thing
was
we
talking
supposed
about.
to see in the directory.
Did you think I was speaking Klingon or something? I don't know
Yeah,
Klingon.
I thought you were talking about the new SD thing. No, I mean most of the files on a typical Commodore disk was either PRG, an SEQ, a relative
yeah.
file,
Seek. Okay.
or yeah, those were pretty much the three. Oh, I think there was maybe something called a random file or something. Never used it. Didn't really get into the. It was pretty much sequential files, program files.
Any questions that people have for Dave? We got Richard Bradley here too. And Stefan. Let's bring him in here. Hello. Auf Wiedersehen. How's it going over there? Do you know of any PET emulators on the 64? We know that the Germans wrote one. And we'd like to know what technology you have. Well, we'll find out. When you got your first PET, were you writing a lot of programs yourself, typing in, or like you said, sprites? You were doing visuals?
Well. Look, I did the same as everybody. You'd go get the magazine, type in the programs that didn't work, and then you needed to try and figure out how to make them work, or you'd wait till 2 or 3 months later when the corrections would come out. And that was with that was mostly because the magazines were like, oh, we can't just put the printout in; we have to typeset it so it looks better.
Mm-hmm.
But when in actual, if they just printed it on the best printer they had with all the graphics as they were, it would have cut down. But mind you, I suppose that meant that you had to buy the magazine in 2 or 3 months to get the working version. And actually, oh yes, I was part of that for a little bit, and that for I don't know 2.5 or 3 years, I would answer questions about modems for Run magazine.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. I found out that you wrote for Run. And what did you do exactly for Run?
Oh,
what year?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. Oh, the funny thing is the way I got the job was I had met up with this lady at the World of Commodore, and she was, did the typical, oh yeah, very good, yeah, you should write for us, you should do something, whatever. And I said, okay, so I gave her my number. Of course, I never heard a thing. So I guess it was around June of that year. I thought, well, maybe I should send her a Christmas card. So I did. And maybe a couple weeks later, the phone rang, and it was her. And she asked me, did you just send me a Christmas card? And I said, yeah, I figured, most people don't really read them around Christmas. And figured, I hadn't got a chance to give you one at the World of Commodore, so I'm either early or late. And she said, well, it's a funny thing. There was this other fellow who'd been writing the column, and he wrote to say that he couldn't keep doing it. And the next thing she opened was my Christmas card. So she called me and she said, do you want to do the telecomputing workshop column? I said, yeah, sure. Didn't know what it paid. Didn't know, So then they would send me all these letters, and I would do my best to answer them.
We have a question here. Let me see.
We have a question.
Orest here. Hi, Orest. So what was the average itinerary for an early TPUG meeting? some software sharing, some code troubleshooting? Well,
Well, they usually lasted a couple of hours. The first ones were at Leaside High School. You could bring your own disc, and you would get the disc of the month copied onto it. And there would be a variety of speakers, and often it was people would get up and show what they had recently written or what they'd recently done or how they had taken something and modified it. But also, I'll never forget the time we had a representative from Commodore who I must say was a bit of a dick in that this was around the time, and I remember there was a fellow, I don't remember his name, but he was a fellow of color, and he got up and he blasted the guy from Commodore about how Commodore was drilling holes in the circuit boards of the 4016s to keep people from upping them to 4032s without paying the money to Commodore to get a 4032, because they did that. They from the factory, the 4016s had these 4 holes drilled in the circuit board. So it was a variety of things. There'd be an update on the club. There'd be some things that were shown that were on the disc of the month. A variety of speakers. Often Jim Butterfield was there, and he would always talk about something. And of course, he could talk to a room of rank beginners all the way up to experts, and everybody was just mesmerized. And so it was a lot, just a lot of demos of what people had done, what they'd been up to. Oh yeah, and as my brother just said, they did show the Commodore 64 before the Commodore 64 was released.
Oh wow. Okay.
I think that was the Christmas demo I saw.
Hey,
Hey there.
that is a
They-
special.
They showed the 64, and they were asked the hole drilling question. Are you going to drill holes in the
Right.
boards of the Commodore 64 so we won't be able to, mess with them? They were grilled to death because they'd gone back to Basic 2.
Oh yeah.
Which the guy answered with a 2-word answer about why they went back to Basic 2. And the answer, maybe Dave remembers the 2 words.
There was a marketing reason.
Well, he just said marketing reason, yeah.
Yeah, in other words.
That's because if you remember the history, Commodore Basic was bought from Microsoft for about $50,000 from a very young oh God, what's his name?
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates. $50,000, you can put it on all the computers you want. Because Microsoft was like small and needed money. And that was the best deal Jack ever made, because let's face it, they put Commodore Basic on how many millions of computers for that licensing fee.
At the beginning, and I think it was Leonard who told the story, is originally Bill Gates wanted to do like $1 a machine or whatever, and Jack Jamil said, "Look, I already have a light."
So guys, let me ask you this. You, Richard, I assume you were there when you got to preview the C64, right?
Oh, I was there. And by the way,
Okay,
that was the last time Commodore ever came to a TPUG meeting.
Whoa,
the last time-
serious?
The last time that guy ever did, Paul Higgins brought him.
That guy, he
Paul
probably
Higgins
lost his
brought him.
job. Jack Trammell just fired that whole department. It's called the Jack Attack, right? So my question is for you, Dave and Richard. When Commodore brought the 64 before it was released, brought it to your meeting, how similar or dissimilar was it from the final product?
Well, from what we could see,
Richard, you've turned your video on, and I'm not sure it's working.
Oh, hang on. I don't want to.
I don't know that we actually really got to see the machine.
You know what? It looked pretty much like a 64. We certainly didn't get to see inside it.
Yep.
But it looked like a bread bin?
Yeah, I mean,
well,
the case,
yeah.
Okay.
But we don't know what kind of weird contraption was actually inside. Like the 128, when they first showed it at CES, they were the original prototypes. They were a disaster inside. They'd overheat. So they would routinely, shift them out, take them back into the back to let them cool down. So I heard, and they certainly were nothing like the final production, but they didn't have to be. They were just showing them at the show. So, but inside they were nothing like the final. So who knows what was in there?
Yeah, it might have been like the Tucker car. Nothing. The prototype was nothing like the production model. I don't know, but it did work.
But that's exciting. And so Jim was there, right? He when Commodore came. I'm just trying to set up the whole
Oh,
Steve.
I'm sure he was.
Probably. He pretty much
Yeah.
came to every meeting.
I mean, I don't have to tell you, you guys knew him personally, but just his finesse with the instructional videos was incredible. His way around the machine. I mean, it's like he knew the addresses of the entire neighborhood, if you will.
He had a gift. I have never met anybody
Oh
who
my
could teach
God.
anything to anybody of any age. He actually used to work, although I don't think they worked closely together at all. He worked for CNT when he was a trainer for CNT when my dad worked there at 151 Front Street in Toronto, and he left to take on this other, basically guru function for the world of of us Commodore people. But he was even the people he worked with then, who also a couple of them came. Bill Cumberland came and spoke at his funeral memorial, and other people, and they have never met anybody who could teach anything to anybody of any
Is Bill
age, and
Cumberland
they would
still
get it.
around?
I would have to think not.
What
No.
was what?
Okay.
Bill Cumberland.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't think so.
And you remember the reason he decided it was time to leave was because CN Telecommunications was moving from 151
Right.
Front Street to out to something called the Ship Center at Islington, and he decided that the 2 hours or more of commuting that would add to his day would cut in to his computer stuff, and he said, "No, I'm out of here." I think they were
Yep.
all and
That was kind of the beginning of the end when they went together with CNCP.
Yep.
It took a while, but it was the beginning.
So let me ask you this. You guys, if you don't mind me bringing in, since Richard's come in and he can fill in the gaps of knowledge or whatever, what was it like when Jack Trammell left? Was it like, do we just continue business as usual when the boss left? Rest in peace, boss man Jack Trammell.
well, it was pretty stunning, and it wasn't until long afterwards I heard of the story and the reasons and other things, but and sadly it was the beginning of the slow motion decline of the whole company. But it was like, here's the guy who started it all, from the typewriters all up to everything, and I just figured something must have really pissed him
And
off.
don't forget the filing cabinets.
Oh yes, the filing cabinet.
Tell me, please tell me.
Well, they made filing cabinets. You can still find them in Salvation Army stores every once in a while. You'll find a 2. I don't know if they made a 3, but a
No,
2
they
or
made a
4 drawer filing cabinet. They were okay, but they've got a little Commodore label dead center in the middle. A little looks almost like the same label that's on the 64, sort of. Like it's oval,
Jack
straight with the
Trammell was
rounded
in the
edges.
filing cabinet business too.
Oh yes, it was
I love this guy.
Commodore business machines. They made typewriters. The first thing, and I have one downstairs or two, was calculators.
Yeah, calculators.
Well,
Yeah,
that
that's
was
what he
no,
means.
that was way after the typewriters. The typewriters were first. The calculators.
Typewriters, calculators, computers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, boss. So the boss man, again, Jack Trammell, we can't underestimate, his significance, his influence. There you go. See,
There's the
the
Commodore
touch, and it's a look at that beautiful form factor and design.
Well,
The
that
way
was one of the reasons he decided.
oh,
Apparently, he got a bunch of chips and things and stuff, and got burned because suddenly the calculator market went to hell, and prices went down and that's when he decided we're never going to let that happen again. That's the whole vertical integration, about how he would basically do his best to own everything to
He owned his suppliers. Like
yeah.
I'm going under cramp. Whoever made the 6502, he bought them.
Yeah,
So every time an Apple went out with a 6502, Jack's company, was it SEMA? Anyway, whoever it was, I mean, Jack was getting money. It didn't matter who put a 6502 in their computer because he owned the company that made them.
Yeah, that was the chip division who subsidized.
we have another question. Did TPUG organize the original walk?
No. That we were there, but that was all Commodore or somebody they hired to organize the show. Oh no, that was like tens of thousands of people at the International Center. That was mammoth. We had a booth, but oh no. That was when it was like 64s were selling like crazy. I think, and it was of course early December, perfect time to get the thing under the
64s
tree.
were selling like crazy, huh?
Oh, and they had the big
That's what created the Christmas computer, right? That show all of a sudden was everyone. If you're going to upgrade your hardware, the deals were on for Christmas, and it was like, oh well, if you've got a pet and you're getting a 64, wait till World of Commodore and get it on sale.
Oh, you can get it on sale. Really?
Yeah. Hey, those
1980
people brought out lots of stuff and they wanted to sell it. And if it wasn't a sale, they'd throw in a modem. Like there'd be add-on,
Oh, wow.
stuff like that. It was I've never seen more nerds.
And we got
that's
one of the best deals ever. Remember, I don't know who we bought it from, but we got another 9090 hard drive.
Yep.
And we turned it on, and it looked okay. It sounded okay, but they said it doesn't work. But the lights, the LEDs all lit up, and we said, "Ooh, well, I think we got it for 300." And we hummed and hawed and tortured ourselves. Well, what if it doesn't work? Or what if? And do you remember what was wrong with it, Richard?
I remember it, but I don't remember what was wrong.
Well, I brought it home carefully, hooked it up to a PET, tried to do a directory or catalog, nothing came up. Tried to do a catalog on device 9, nothing. 10, nothing. 11, nothing. Device 12.
That's right.
It's somehow been changed to device 12, and I don't even know how you change it to device 12.
Right.
But it had, because typically on a 1541, a lot of those things, there were two pads. You could cut the traces or put in switches. You could go 8, 9, 10, or 11, but this was device 12. And we never had the heart to tell the people who we got it from that it was perfectly fine. But it had been just
because at that point that was about a $3,000 drive.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so I wanted to know more. I have two things I don't want to forget about. Number one, what were Christmas TPUG events like? Number one, and number two, the repair nights.
Well, I don't remember we ever have any of the repair nights because that's just. I mean, I know in later years there've been repair nights, but back then, not really. I mean, mostly the 64s the power supplies would die. But I never remember going to a TPUG.
No, we didn't have back then. I mean, the Christmas meeting, either that one or the next one would usually have the Butterfield tax program.
Oh yeah.
Because he brought out a free tax program that would run on your PET or 64 or VIC or whatever. So that was always, and there'd always be, a little deck, nothing dramatic, but there was always that sort of somehow on the disc there'd be something Christmassy, right? And you can go back and find all those things, on the archive, of course. But usually, I mean, the most part about Christmas was just getting to a TPUG meeting in the snow was always more interesting and getting home was sometimes more interesting than actually getting to Leaside.
You must remember, there were times when I remember, and this is like I eventually ended up working at Earl Haig Secondary School years later, long later. But I remember we had 64 meetings at Earl Haig Secondary in their great big auditorium, and there were hundreds of people, like 400, 500, 600 places packed.
Oh, it was there wasn't a seat to be had.
And one time when we were going to, Richard and I were doing the monthly disc thing, and just for fun, and that was before they rebuilt the school. We rode out on the stage quickly on our motorcycles.
We did.
And
And then they kicked TPUG out of the school.
Well, it's
Oh,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah. Because years later, when I worked at Earl Haig, I knew the dance teacher who was responsible for that. Even, we didn't burn rubber. We didn't do anything
No.
bad. We basically just
Not at all.
came out.
So,
We didn't hurt.
what systems did you have at TPUG meetings? Did you have a pad of 64? Did people bring some of their
Well,
systems?
Eventually, it divided up into 64. Like there was a 64 meeting as opposed to a TPUG meeting.
Oh, wow.
So because there was that much of demand once the 64s came out. I mean, we
Right.
at one point we were at York Mills Collegiate, right? At one point, we must have been, because that's where
Yes,
that was where I
we
met
were.
my wife for the second time, and we've been together now coming up on 39 years.
Oh, well, congratulations on your anniversary.
Yep, that was absolutely Leaside.
So you had a
No, not
64?
Leaside. Sorry.
No, that was York
No,
Mills.
it was York Mills. Yes, it was. I remember. Yes. Actually, you
Yeah,
know what?
they had
There was a time when there may not have been a TPUG meeting somewhere every night of the month,
Yeah.
but pretty close. Because there was a
Wow.
West End and there was a 64.
There was a West Side meeting out at oh gosh, what school was that? I remember the
One of the universities or colleges.
there was another one. There was another one out at in Whitby. At one of them was Dunbarton High School, and I'm trying to remember where that is. And the other it wasn't one of every night, but there was probably one every week. And it was
there
like
was
the
more than
traveling
that.
road show. And there was Mississauga. Sometime it was, look, you got to remember at one point, TPUG had right around 20,000 active members. Is that right?
A lot of them were around the world, but yeah, there was a lot of them around Toronto.
Yeah. And the 1 year I remember specifically, they had revenues of $750,000.
Wow.
And expenditures of 754.
Yep.
And is that from membership dues?
Membership dues, discs, probably some money in, because they used to do their own. What were those shows they called them?
Oh, the convention.
Yeah, the TPUG conventions. Yeah, there'd be some money in and out for those.
By the way, I was just looking for a TPUG magazine that I could look at some meetings, but as I was flipping through, and I haven't found that yet to tell you better, but I did find a transaction. And what caught my eye is it said Butterfield Centerfold. So I quickly grabbed it and I looked, and sure enough, in the middle of the magazine transaction, there is.
Nice. There is, boss.
The Butterfield Centerfold.
Yeah, man.
Shot at the art shop.
Beautiful.
And
look at that. Yeah. He was boss. He was the boss, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Sadly, all the artifacts from that ended up going to the computer museum in Brantford just before the death of the creator. And I don't know. I guess that stuff is somewhere, but certainly his wife, partner, whatever at the time, was not big on sharing.
The creator.
That just we just passed the anniversary of that day, because we went to it. By the way, I'm holding in my hand the issue number 21, July 1983 of the Torpet.
Oh, can we see it?
Yeah, I'm just kind of look. It has a picture, I believe, of one of the. Hang on, let me just see if I can. I'm on a phone, so bear with me.
Sure.
See how I do it.
And these are all archived, I presume?
How do I turn the camera on this thing? Oh, I guess I'll just. I don't know if you can see anything of that.
The torped, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the TPUG convention.
Wow, look at that.
Have I got it like sort of
That was
covered?
that was at maybe that was at I think it was a college or university place.
Probably George Brown.
It might have been.
Yeah, somebody involved in TPUG back then worked at George Brown. I turn this camera around. I don't know how to do that. Oh well, now I'm staring at the ceiling. And as it says, lots of VIC 64 and pet tricks.
Huh.
Letters to the editor. An ad for the C64 link from RTC.
Oh yeah.
You can see this.
Oh
The
yeah.
link.
Oh here's an ad for something unique. That was the Spartan. That was where you could plug in and put an Apple II on the back of your 64.
No way.
Oh yeah. I remember hearing at one point, I guess something hadn't gone well, and they were being cleared out at a place called Active Surplus. And I should have gone down and bought everyone because they are
Oh,
rare indeed. And this was like, 35 years ago. But now they've
What?
had,
Wait,
they've
so
had-
you could play Apple II games on your 64? Is that why you?
look, if it plugged in the user port, the cartridge port. I think it plugged into pretty much every port. It was bigger than the 64, and it plugged in the back.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's
and
hilarious.
you could use them both. Organized.
But why would you? I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think that's why they didn't do well. But also they had
How much was that device?
$599.
Oh, I guess if you wanted to, in all fairness to Apple people, Macintosh people, you could play old games. Maybe your Apple II died.
It wasn't.
Or Apple II died, and your 64 is there waiting in the corner.
But it was still cheaper than buying an Apple.
Right.
God, I'm reading this
Hilarious.
thing, remembering some of the names: John Shepard,
Oh, yeah.
Keith Faulkner, Mike Hishka.
Wait, how much was it again? The device?
$599.
$5.99. What? That's
And
expensive, man.
The other thing it had,
Yeah.
and I never had one of these, never heard of it, but there was also a thing that some board went into the 1541 to let it read Apple discs. I didn't know about it at the time.
Oh.
Looking through the magazine, trying to find.
Oh. Okay.
Trying to find the thing about.
And how much was that back in the day?
I don't know. I just know the original thing.
Oh.
$599. And then there was I didn't even know that existed. I'm just looking through to try and find where.
God.
So why would you want to get an Apple II computer then?
Well, of course.
That was the idea. You wouldn't.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
look, when the Amiga 1000 came out, they had the sidecar, so you could have an IBM on your Amiga 1000.
Oh yeah.
And of course, there was the bridge card.
Oh, by the way, which reminds me, Dave, what Amigas do you own?
Hang on, he's going to have to think about that for a second.
Well, I think
I just found an. Yep.
Go ahead.
I just found an ad for the Pet Loader. And it was a Pet Loader emulator reconfigures the Commodore 64 memory regardless of any recent ROM change to duplicate the PET internally without interfering with basic user memory. It was from the Education Circuit Incorporated from Landing, New Jersey, and it shows a picture of a cassette running this thing called 8.4 version of Pet Loader.
Oh.
What
year was that?
The magazine was 1983.
Okay.
I'm looking at one from '86, and I did find the calendar of TPUG events, and I won't list them all, But in this, whatever month this was of 86, there's the magazine with a 128 on the front. There
So
was
it's called, okay, so there was a custom pet loader, 1983.
Yep.
That
From
we're talking about. It's called
the-
a custom pet loader
it
utility.
said they called it Pet Loader.
Okay.
Pet trademark loader emulator cassette, and it would load in. I'll send you a picture of the page if you want, or I'll post it. I
Yeah.
just haven't opened this up
Pet
in so
loader.
long.
Pet
And
loader.
it came from a place called the Education Circuit Incorporated.
Circuit Incorporated. Okay, 1983.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
There's a
okay, back to the Amigas for a second. I have 500s, I have 1000s, I have variations on the 2000 that would be like the 2000, 2008, the 2500. I did have two Amiga 4000, but there was a guy who was like really wanting them, so I did sell them. And back to also on here, in this year of 1986, when there's a picture of the 128, there were 12 TPUG meetings a month.
there you
Yeah.
go. So one every 2.5 days.
Incredible. So, by the way, okay, so we're toggling back and forth between Dave's Amiga and Richard. One last question, Richard, about that that emulator.
Pet loader? Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, the pet loader was on a disc or a ROM.
No, it's on a cassette.
It's on a cassette. Okay.
It's on a cassette. I'll take a picture of this page. There's also a very inspiring article written in this same one about how to re-ink printer ribbons.
Oh, sweet. Is there an archive of the pet loader online somewhere?
You got me.
Probably.
I'll be honest. Other than a 1702 downstairs and a couple of magazines, I don't have much of a collection.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
No.
You gave it out to your brother?
Bring that stuff over when you get a chance.
Yeah. Somewhere I've got one of those. I do have one of those things that it gives you like four expansion ports for a 64 with a switch. I think it might have been an RTC thing.
Bring it on over.
So,
Yeah.
Dave, what Amigas do you have?
Sorry, there are some 500s and some 1000s and some 2000 as well. To the 2000, it was the best in terms of adding on. I mean, I know the 3000 and the 4000 were faster and all that, but the 2000, there was the 2000, there was the 200 HD, which had a hard drive, and then there was the 2500 that had a hard drive and an accelerator card. But I mean, you could load those suckers up. That was also, you could have the bridge card in there, and I think there was an XT bridge card and an AT bridge card, which I don't think you could run together. But it's funny, when I was in Florida and I had a store, there was this weasel in town who was also supposedly a dealer, and he would tell people the only way you can get a hard drive on an Amiga is if you get a bridge card and you run it through that. And he was a lying scammer. And I don't know how many of his victims I had to help sort out, because yes, you could run an Amiga with a hard drive through the bridge card, but it was not really great, and it was not very fast, and it was silly. But anyway, that's how he would get a whole bunch more money out of people. So I would help them out and sort them out.
Dave, I just sent you a copy of the ad for the pet loader into your messenger as a picture.
Thank you.
So you can pass that on.
Okay.
Thank you. And from what I understand, the Vice emulator is the closest, up to 99% compatible with the original hardware, right? So I guess there's people that I know, in the community that have gotten rid of their hardware and do emulation. I don't know. I mean, I know that's a sore topic for some people, but it's still a way, I guess, to keep in touch.
Yep. Oh, by the way, back to the Amigas for a sec. The reason I have and I don't know how many, but it's less than 10. I figure on the 1,000. At one point, Commodore came out with a thing that said that you could trade in your 1,000 and $1,000 and get a 2,000.
Oh, okay.
So when I was doing the store, and we had a bunch of people come in with them, and all Commodore wanted back to prove this was the keyboard. They didn't want the machine. So that's how I ended up kind of doing what Dave Hook did with the copying the monthly disc. When I joined this club in Florida called the Sarasota Manatee Amiga User Group, and every month we would meet in a bank meeting room, a community room, and I would show up there with, I don't know, 5 or 6 Amiga 1000s all stacked up. And because I really didn't have keyboards for all of them, I had a switch box, and we would copy the monthly discs. And so I had external drives as well. And I remember this one fellow, he was funny. He goes, "Oh, we can do better. We can do it faster. We got, I said, yeah, but you see, I've got the program loaded in to protect us from viruses. The viruses were a thing at the time. They'd hide in the boot sector. So one month I said, okay, fine, Wayne, whatever you think you want to do, that's fine. And then, of course, we ended up spreading a virus around. I said, well, that's enough of that. So, but basically, it was, I would just come in and
You spread a virus from what computer?
Oh, it was from the Amiga 1000.
Darn it.
Because, see, when I loaded up the Amiga 1000 with the modified workbench, it had a virus checker. But other programs didn't have that. Because I would just do it. It's almost like you take take the icon and drag it over, copy DF0 to DF1, and away you go. And then I had a switch box for the monitor, I had a switch box for the keyboard. And actually, I didn't really need the keyboard much because you could just use the mouse. But I would just copy, check them all, make sure they're fine. If something didn't copy, I'd try again. But it had the virus checker in there. It's funny, with that club down there, which went very well, I was elected president before I even joined.
That's awesome.
Right.
What were you? And you guys had your own discs for those those monthly, right?
Oh yeah, well somebody there would put together. Oh, I guess it was that same guy, Wayne, would put together a disc every month.
And where is that? Where are the archives for those discs?
I have no clue.
Yeah, I didn't realize this. I just found back another active surplus annex story. At one point, they were clearing out when acoustic couplers came out. I think about $300 or so each, and active surplus was selling one for $28 because it was taken out of some terminal or something.
Yep.
And there was a way to make it work on a PET by plugging in its wires. Anyway, I just found my own article written called "That $28 Modem and Your Pet," and it told you with diagrams how to connect it to your pet, so you could have a $28 300 baud acoustic coupler.
You remember
And where was that? That's awesome. Where was that published?
That's in this 1983 TPUG magazine, or the Torpet.
Oh, very
So
cool.
one page of writing, another page of diagrams, and
the Torpet started, and then, but it was not really part of the club. It was done by this fellow Bruce Beach, and then things got kind of ugly, and then the Torpet carried on, as did TPUG magazine. It started, and one of the things that that started is there was one episode of the Torpet that had a picture. It was a pretty awful picture of the TPUG office with the people who worked there, and it really wasn't a great picture. Supposedly, it wasn't supposed to be the one on the cover.
It wasn't supposed to be the cover. Bruce had not properly sent the right stuff to the publisher, to the printer, and they ended up printing the wrong cover on the magazine.
And it wasn't a good picture. But you know who was in that picture?
Yeah, our mother.
Doris Bradley, as well as Chris Bennett and his mother and his sister
Yep.
And I don't remember who else. But anyway, but now I mean, look, anytime you get a group of well-intentioned people together, there's always going to be somebody who wants to screw it up. And there was a whole lot of drama in the original TPUG.
Oh, and some political
Oh yes.
strife. Oh
And
yeah.
anyway, so that is how the Tour Pit went one way and TPUG magazine went another way, or started. And because then it was always the big, oh well, are we a magazine or are we a club? And then somebody brilliant decided, let's put the TPUG magazine on newsstands. And it did horribly there because it said TPUG magazine.
You know what? The TPUG magazine was really the beginning of the end of a big club because of the money that it took
Yep.
to produce and publish and all that stuff.
What they did, it's a TPUG magazine still. You know what? Actually, just up until recently, or maybe 2 or 3 years ago or so, the TPUG Facebook page didn't mention Commodore. And when I got onto being one of the administrators, I immediately changed the name and added Commodore and Amiga and whatever it's called now. And I know that because when people don't go onto Google and type in, let's search for TPUG, they just don't. And that was the whole thing with the magazine. They put it on a newsstand. People had no clue what the hell it was. Now they did put near the top. Eventually, like on this one here, the one I was just looking at, it says the magazine for all Commodore computer users in tiny little letters at the top. Nobody knew what TPUG magazine was just out in the world. So I'm sure the magazine sales were pretty atrocious. It was just, but still, look, there was all kinds of politics and committees and stupidity that went on, and really, I just tried to stay out. Although at one point, there were 3 of us on the board of directors.
There were,
and it was anyway. It was just, it was, sadly, a lot of the people who brought up things back then, it was similar in a way to what's going on in politics today of people who just, might come in with their own crazy vision of things, who suddenly, oh yeah, we gotta go on the newsstand.
How did you guys respond to the IBM era and Intel, the Intel processor?
Well, mostly like everybody.
Did you guys get suckered into getting an IBM?
Oh, I resisted as long as I could, but I mean, I ended up working for almost half of my 25-year career where I worked. Once I left Ryerson, which is no longer Ryerson, where I worked on mainframes, I ended up working in hardware and software support for PCs. So, I tried to resist, but the job was the temptation for that job and all the rest of it. So no, I'm much more PC self-taught, educated, and experienced than
which
anything
IBM
else. Oh, when I started doing that, it was basically 386s and 486s and up. DOS 3.3, WordPerfect 5.1, Lotus 1.2.3, Word Perfect, I guess. Yeah, so that's the era when I got out of mainframes. I worked in IBM mainframes at Ryerson as a computer operator in this monstrously big cold room with a false floor and disk drives that shook the floor.
And what were you doing on 386s?
Oh, they were just, you know what? It was just, what did I do? Oh, first of all, I was building up, I was getting rid of them and actually upgrading them and putting in 486 boards. But I worked for a union, and every business requires computers, and they did too. And we had computers all across the province. So I ended up learning how to do customer support and helping people out through the phone a lot. And in fact, getting people to put their own hard drives in over the phone. So no, it was a good career move.
But by then the 8-bit era had gone.
Oh yeah, no, but I kind of, hey, you got to remember, I said I've been married for 39 years this year. I got married at 20. I had my first son. He was 20. I was 22. When TPUG moved away from me, I was no longer able to really kind of be involved that much, other than I still had stuff. And I can't remember how old my son was when at the World of Commodore. He might have been 3. He won an entire Amiga 1000 monitor, drive, the works. I got pictures of him sitting in front of Amiga 1000 in a diaper with headphones on. But I have been not nearly as close to 8-bit computing as my brother has, just by necessity and having 4 kids.
Well, really, you know what? A lot of people I bump into or I hear from online that, they started on the 64 or the VIC or the PET. And even like that movie I was telling about, Hide and Seek, there were people that inspired them to, get into such things. But everybody would have had to move to IBM.
Where can we watch this movie?
Well,
Sorry,
it's on YouTube somewhere. I've got to find it again, but I intend to somehow download it.
I'll download it. Just give me the link again.
Because I was behind the scenes on it. I mean, Richard was an extra, but unfortunately he sat in a seat that really didn't get shown much. Although I think we see him walking through once. But I did
I can download it.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to do a thing with a commentary of the behind the scenes stories that while it was going on, because that took some while, and I was. I mean, basically, they hired a guy from Waterloo who was probably a genius, but he didn't know the PET. He didn't know the 64, and the stuff that he did over months and months and months was crap. Unfortunately, they didn't show me the crap that he'd done for some of the scenes at the atomic plant, because if they had, I would have said I can do better than that. So most of the program where the people were interacting with the P1 program that was out there and everywhere, I did on the PET. And as I told the guy I just answered a question, I got the job because I happened to be sitting in the computer room, and in came all these weird people looking around. And I remember the director, who was very French, and they were scouting locations. And they talked to a teacher we knew who was, his name was Gord Mahaffey. And apparently they'd given the script to this Waterloo genius some months before, and he'd done almost nothing. And so anyway, Gord Mahaffey sent them over to me, or sent them over to me, and they showed me something, and I looked at it and I said, oh, okay, let me see. And it was almost like recreating the text from a bulletin board. Like just having it, print out, little by little by little. And so I quickly, while they were looking around the room, I did a little bit of something, but it wasn't much of anything. But I said, you mean something like this? And in the maybe 10 minutes that I'd had the thing, I think I'd done more than this guy had done in the months that he'd had it. Because, if you're going to, yes, Waterloo's a fine place. It keeps a lot of people, actually, Richard's daughter was there. She's a mathematical and programming genius. But if you sat her down in front of a PET, she'd say, what the hell? So anyway, I ended up doing the programming. And the thing that the miracle was, they thought was a miracle, was that I decided right quick, actors can't type this stuff in. So I would already have the text that they had to do. Like, regardless of what key they pressed, the right stuff would come up. And they were just astounded. Why? How'd you think of that? I said, because there's no way you're going to have some actor go in there, typing this, big line of questioning and actually get it right. So anyway, it was quite something.
My oldest daughter is a programmer at D2L in Kitchener. She went to university and never came back.
Yep. And worked at Waterloo for quite some time.
She did, where they used to have an entire, because remember, Waterloo had languages they brought out. They had a whole series of Waterloo Basic, Waterloo, I don't remember them all, but they actually had a glass case somewhere where they had a Super PET and a whole bunch of their books and discs on display in the building my daughter worked in, and I think that stuff ended up at part of the new museum that came out of the old museum, because there's something going on out there with a museum.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine how many programmers were influenced by a Commodore machine?
Well, by
Oh,
now most of them are retired, but yeah, like
close to it, yeah.
that's
Oh, really?
well, because let's face it, when did it come out?
Wow.
Look at how old we are now. And let's face it, the kids back then, like the people who were already into programming, were adults.
Hmm.
We're turning 60 this year. So when we were kids, I mean, there were people in there learning how to program and work on stuff in their 30s and 40s. Do the math. We're all getting older.
Well, I was just thinking back to your question about the IBM days, and my great thing about the IBM days is I
Yeah.
pretty much got out of the computer stuff, and ended up working in high schools like people, because at that point there were so many people who really thought they knew what was going on, and they didn't, and they'd lead people down the garden path about what they should buy and what they should do, and all these wonderful consultants. I said, "Oh, I can't handle this." It was easier dealing with people than dealing with that sort of people, because I'd end up having to clean up their messes. So I was just like, no. And it wasn't that I got out of it. It just I went on to deal with the young people of the day and all their troubles, and trying to keep them from doing silly things like kill themselves and such. But I've always been on the fringe, but I just over the years, of course, as I say, I don't try and get more stuff. But there have been even times that it's been a while, but there've been times that I've literally been driving down the street and I'll say, wait, what's that? And there's somebody who's put out a stack of Commodore stuff for the garbage. And of course, I do the only reasonable thing. I put it in reverse, and I go back and I look it over. And actually, there was one time I remember I think it was mostly VIC 20 stuff, but there was some monitor there that I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, but I don't know. Anyway, so I quickly came home, checked it all out, decided that the monitor either wouldn't work, didn't work, wasn't compatible with some sort of whatever, and I actually took it back to the same house and put it back in front of their house. But once again, I try not to get more. But as you can see from behind me, it hasn't gone well. And then, of course, there was my brother, who would come home once in a while with something that he found at a Value Village for $2.99, like a Commodore 64 or a VIC 20 or whatever. I'd be like, and how did I know what that was the price? Because it was written on there with a grease pencil or something. And I'd be like, oh, cool. So I'm sure I still have some of them with a grease pencil written on there. And
What about a VIC 20? How many do you have of those?
well, I didn't think I have as many as I do. But once again, I was in the pool room, and I thought I had 4 or 5 there, and it ended up being 9. I would estimate roughly maybe 25,
Oh, yeah?
maybe, and 1541s. Oh God, I remember I was.
What's your memory of the VIC 20 when it came out?
It was late.
Yeah,
What?
It was delayed.
Yeah.
We were never going to buy a pet. We were going to get a VIC 20. It was supposed to be coming out. It was supposed to be coming up, and it was delayed and delayed and delayed so long. We got a pet, and we skipped right past it mostly and went to a 64 after that.
Pretty much. Although now I have some, but really, it was kind of Well, when the 64 came out, I said, "Great, 64, great, this is handy." I mean, the 22 columns did not impress me. So really, at the time, it was a long time before I really even had a bit. But time has a way of taking care of that.
I did enjoy it. There was some game. It wasn't Asteroids. It was some other cartridge game that was just addictive like cocaine on the Vic, where you
Oh, I know what
well,
it was. Omega Race.
Omega Race. Oh yes,
It was
Oh,
better
oh
than the
yes.
arcade, and
I
even the
could.
64 version.
I would buy a
really
Vic
good.
and an Omega Race cartridge right now if I had one,
oh, wow.
and hook it up to a 55-inch monster TV and probably end up,
Mm.
playing it for 24 days without stopping.
It could
That's
use
why I don't have one.
That game's legendary, yeah.
It could use paddles or a joystick,
Yep.
and it was really good. Actually, when I have of course I have more than one cartridge of Omega Race, and I thought that maybe, and I'll talk to the TPUG people, but maybe next year we'll see. Maybe we should set up a bunch of them and sort of have a little tournament. So I mean, they can't communicate with each other, but you can say, okay, ready, set, go, and see how it goes. But I think I could probably set up 4 or 5 at the moment. The other one that I really liked on the Big 20 was it was called Avenger, but it wasn't
Oh,
Avenger. It was Space Invaders.
oh,
And that Space Invaders is much better than the Pet one ever was. But once again, there are some cartridges that I look at in the game. Yeah, that's fine.
Adventure.
But
Yeah.
so far, I have never got rid of an Omega Race or an event. And of course, in that last batch of stuff I got, which Richard went and picked up, there was more Avengers and more Omega Race, which I
Well,
set aside, and I've tested them. They work. But other cartridges, some of the games are just like, whatever. But those ones are sacred.
I do
Adventure.
remember
Yeah.
playing on the 64 to some degree of addiction, various versions of Summer and Winter Olympics.
Winter
Mm.
games, summer games, and winter games.
Winter games, summer games, and
That was very popular.
the diving. I really enjoyed the platform diving in the summer with the the tucks and they were anyway. You could do a belly flop and get nothing, but you get four tuck position rotations into that and just kick it out in time. But yeah, a lot of people, they were very popular, those games.
Actually, I have another story about another TV show I was involved with. It was called Hanging In, and it was about a youth street, a College Street Youth Center. And because of the involvement with the one CBC thing, then they said, hey, maybe you could help. So there was this wonderful lady named Ruth Springford, who was the secretary receptionist there. She'd been in one of the best movies I ever remember seeing, which was The Changeling. She was a nasty old woman. But anyway, so I ended up getting called down there, and they wanted a driving game thing for her because she was supposed to be learning to drive. And I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with this. So it was one of the only times I ever ended up going to Commodore. I knew people through the bulletin board, and I bumped into online. It was either I think it was David Berezowski who worked there, and I said, look, I need a thing. Well, anyway, he gave me a cartridge version of Le Mans before it was released, and paddles and such. And the cool thing was, because it was paddles, she could hold a paddle and look like she was doing it, but I really was controlling it. And that's how we did it, where she would be there, and my golly, it was craziness. And it's funny because they say to me, okay, crash. And I'm like, I don't want to crash. I'm doing well. Anyway, but that was another thing. That was the one my trip to Commodore. And so I've always liked Le Mans because of that. It wasn't out yet. I'm sure it helped when it came out on the show to promote it. But here she was supposedly learning to drive, and this was like this was one of the, I think, a lot of the racing things, you have the lines coming at you. Oh yeah, I'll go around the corner. This was like from the top, and it was sprites. And some of the stuff they used on the show was just magic. Because here I am coming up on like 3 cars. There's no way to get through, but somehow I do.
Yeah, that was neat because they showed her playing it. They showed the
Yeah.
screen and
Yeah.
her and a controller, but off camera. is
Oh, yeah.
the guy really driving the month? Because
And it
I'm
was,
pretty sure she wouldn't have got very far on it.
I don't know, it was a tight squeeze because, but basically out of frame on a TV set, they can do all kinds of things. So I still had to be able to see the monitor such that I could really kind of make it do its thing. But I couldn't be seen. So, we just coordinated on where they film and where I'd be. Oh, actually, there's one last story about that hide and seek movie. The opening sequence to the movie is shot at night, and they had lights up, the fake moon and all that. They never did use that classroom I first found me in. So we're getting ready to do it. And of course, they tell me, well, how long until you get it on the monitor? And they told me. And so I set up a time delay. And of course, they did it 3 or 4 times and screwed it up. And they were reloading things. Remember, this was film and like real tape on the sound. And I said to the director, I said, okay, I think I have a way. Because they were getting tired of like, okay, we blew it again. Oh, we blew it again. We blew it again. So those pets were connected to the disk drive through a system called the Arbiter, which is by batteries included. And that basically meant that one drive and a whole bunch of computers. So in that opening scene, and you never see me, I am sitting on the floor on the row of pets behind the one. I have tied up the IEEE bus on the machine I'm at, and I reach up ever so gently to tap the space bar quietly, like just push it down, when I get the cue from somebody that it's time for the thing to start. So there was no time delay on the other one. I took the time delay out. I did this thing where I tied up the bus to the drive, had the other computer look for the drive, but it couldn't do anything because it couldn't get it because I tied it up. And as soon as I pressed the space bar, the thing starts rolling. And that was the opening sequence of when they first see the stuff coming out. It was of P1 and all that other stuff. And it took one take once we did that. But that was where it was, I told you they hired the guy from Waterloo who was a genius, but he never would have had a clue. It was only because, and it was the last, I was like, oh God, you keep telling me how long, and then it isn't how long, and what are we doing? It's late at night, and da 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 da. And then it was literally because I knew the Arbiter, that I knew that I could quickly, and it really didn't take long. I turned on the other machine. I just had it, tie up the bus, had that one look for the bus, which you couldn't get. And I said, okay, I'm ready. And they weren't even reloaded the camera yet. They said, what do you mean? I said, I need to sit down here, but somebody over there, obviously, you got to wave at me. As soon as you wave at me, I'll push this, then that'll start. They were like, really? Yes. And once again, that was because I knew the system, I knew the machine, and the weird things that were, and we did it. Boom, one take. Thank you. Because the camera, of course, was coming in, woo, and they got the guy in the dolly, and they got the guy, the camera guy, and this, once again, this was before all the computer stuff. It was film.
What year was this?
Oh, that would have been 1983, I guess. Anyway, but while they're reloading the camera, I basically came up with this thing right quick that would be okay. It'll never screw up again. You cue me at the right time, and we're gold. And the director's like, really? Yeah. And all of that stuff. I mean, being all it was the pet and all that stuff that got. But since then, I did go on to do stuff. Actually, just today, I found the last thing I ever did on TV, which just came out in March. I was just a background person in a show called You're My Hero, which is a comedy done by a fellow who has severe cerebral palsy. And it's on CBC Gem. And there's a scene where I'm waiting to get a signature from a wrestler, and he's in front of me. I never get my signature because I get kicked out because, oh, you come here. But anyway, so I have gone on to do background things and other things on TV and movie things and other stuff. And that wasn't really because of the pet and the other stuff. It was because I got that thing then and kind of got the bug of, wow, this is cool.
And Dave, one last question.
Yeah.
Again, what did you do for Run? What were you were responding
Oh,
to?
the telecomputing workshop. People would write with questions, and then I would do my best to answer them. And whether it was about what there was always the thing, and this always bugged me. There were some modems that came out, and all the modems pretty much worked fine. It's just they didn't work with, like, I think as Richard was saying, Punter's bulletin board also had the Punter protocol for downloading. And like anything, you can have like a Volks modem. I remember there was a Volks modem. There's other stuff, but the program that came with it didn't support the Punter net, didn't support the Punter protocol for downloading. It didn't support, so oh, the modem's no good. No, the modem's not bad. The program, and I've always told people, even up to today, people ask me about, well, what machine should I get her? And actually, there was a thing a while ago when my son, he decided he could probably benefit from a tablet thing. And I said, oh, okay. And there was a certain program, and my wife at the time was at me like, okay, we got to go to an iPad. I said, well, hold on. We need to find out what does this special program work on, and then we need to get to that, whatever that is. So anyway, a lot of it was about modem incompatibility, but I mean, the modems all did what they needed to do. It was mostly about software things. But it's funny, I was just looking through a magazine. I don't know if I ever told you this, Richard, but I think no, I wouldn't have. There was actually a question in there that I answered, and I'd have to look back to the date, but it was from Big John, who lived up here in Markham, who knew through motorcycles.
Oh yes.
And I don't remember, like, I read these things and said, gee, did I really say that? Did I look that up? I don't remember this at all.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was a modem out, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a modem, and there was no software for it. And actually, the company, I don't remember, it was through TPUG somehow. The company found me, and I wrote a terminal program for there was one thing that made it incompatible with every other program. I don't remember what it was, but I wrote or modified up a terminal program to make it work for theirs, including something that a lot of programs didn't have at the time, which was an auto dialer, which would because bulletin boards were one line at a time. So if you didn't get through, you had to phone back. So this would auto dial a bulletin board and then alert you when it connected. Damned if I can remember the name of that modem. I probably have one somewhere here in a box.
Just bring it down.
I know.
Yeah, just bring it down.
I know.
But yeah, no, auto dialers were essential, because
Well,
like as soon as somebody hung up, it would be open. But then, when does that happen? Who knows?
Yes,
I even
yeah.
wrote a War Games dialer, like the movie, if anyone remembers it. So it
Yeah.
would dial. You could put in like an exchange, and it would start like 782 because back then we didn't do area codes. You put in 782, and it'd dial 782-0000, and then it would, if it found a carrier, it would then give you a list of the numbers that had computers on the other end, even though you really had no idea what they were, but you could always go back and check them out. But hey, a Commodore 64, not too many people remember it, but people used to do phone phreaking on a Commodore 64.
So tell us about the War Games dialer.
The War Game, it was just like the movie. Like,
Cool.
if you ever saw the movie War Games, where that, what was his name? The actor? Matthew Broderick? When he was really young, and he brought his kind of sort of girlfriend over and said, oh, here's my, and it just dialed a number, and it would give him a list back of if it ran into a bank, or like if a computer answered the phone, it would give him a list of the connections so he could go back and try and hack into them later. And the whole series of that movie was that he hacked into Whopper, the the war machine.
Thermonuclear war.
I have that video on VHS.
Well, it's funny because that was around
Josh
the same
was
time.
calling him, by the way.
Yes, that was around the same time that I was working on that other movie, and Like that's one of the behind the scene things. Also, they had all kinds of sounds and things that were not at all accurate. So, like, I made sure they used the carrier sound of the modem. A sound guy came to my bedroom to record the sound of the printer, the sound of like typing on the key, the modem sound, all kinds of. And actually, in that movie, like in the Pizza, there's a scene in the movie, and another thing where they've got a printer and it's coming at Gregory P1. Yeah, like the program is looking for this guy. Well, that wasn't the print. Like they had a printer that was in the scene, but the close up was our 2022 printer. Because they didn't know they couldn't. It was all done very well, and actually that's what a lot of people have commented on. Boy, a lot of the stuff that they really did in there was quite accurate. And I said, yeah, well, that's because this is how it would be. And they said, okay. And they didn't fight. Actually, I was thinking of another thing. I had the speed coming out on the screen at whatever I thought was roughly 300 baud, but it took a while for stuff to come out. If they'd said, "Hey, can you speed that up?" I would have said, "Yeah, sure, I can make it go a little faster." They never asked, so I never did.
Did you ever get a call from Joshua on your pet
Never.
one night?
No.
You never got a call?
No. But another thing in that movie, because basically they gave me like I had the script, but there was a whole lot of latitude and stuff. I was like, I don't know what the hell to do. So, and I didn't know it'd end up being used or something, but I'd have to do all the search stuff, and it was all just like P1 was like following. He knew what was going on. And so anyway, at some point in there, I put in this thing that they were taking this flight, and it was on Bradley's helicopter service. So, and then nobody asked me about it. They just filmed all the stuff. So later, when it comes out, they had some guy doing the voice. Yeah, Bradley helicopter service here, and I didn't know that was it. But I could have called it anything they wanted. They just didn't say, so I just made it up. And in some of the scenes where they were changing marks, I put in a bunch of the names of the teachers at Northern Secondary. And but they
Dave, we
didn't
want
say.
to know. Dave, we saw that you bought some tickets to Russia. Who are you working for?
Not me.
You want me to believe a computer is calling you? Put this guy in handcuffs right now. It's Joshua. It's Joshua. He's trying to start a war. Okay.
No.
Let's put this kid in the brig here.
Actually,
I
the
love
best.
that film.
You know what the best way I think would be for computer security now? If you took a pet to work and you wrote everything on that, and you had it on the disk, it's not attached to any network. It's not attached to anything. Who the hell is ever going to get into it? Even if they find your disk, how are they going to ever get into them? If they didn't know what you were using, we have a 5 1/4 inch disk. Oh,
Yeah, well, even if they put it into an old PC drive, it wouldn't read it.
I don't know.
That's why it's really important to keep this, history alive. Is 8-bit computing is more relevant than ever, and everybody wants to recreate it and create the nostalgia. So they're coming out with all these little knockoffs of things that look like it, but the architecture is different. But again, I think it's about keeping the spirit alive. So I don't know what your thoughts are as we kind of conclude what your thoughts are on, all this new stuff, the new Commodore, the new this, the new Amiga, the new Atari. What are your thoughts about all the recreations, you guys, you and your brother?
Well, look, you know what? I did get one of those mini 64s, but immediately I wasn't incredibly impressed with it. I haven't got the bigger one. I mean, one of the things is immediately it was like, hey, there's no video, there's no like just regular composite output from this thing. And I've looked at it, but it kind of reminds me of the joystick project with Jerry, and it was like, oh, well, okay, this is interesting. And actually, the joystick looked much the same. You know what? I figure if nothing else, people will get it, and maybe they'll take a little trip down memory lane, or maybe if they're new to it, they'll say, oh, well, this is cool. But I'd like to think that maybe some of the people say, oh, gee, yeah, maybe I should get another Amiga 500, the real thing, or the real, I mean, I know there's lots of people with emulators. And I haven't checked out all these newfangled things, but they're, I suppose, they're keeping it alive sort of, but really, it's not the same.
No, it's not the same, but you know what? If it's kind of like if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where you came from, and for a lot of people, they're just not going to be able, it's all they're going to be able to find, right? And they wouldn't know how to fix anything if they bought it used. They wouldn't know how to fix a Pet or a Vic or a 64. So it's kind of like, I mean, I'm sure some people bought them, and I bought a Mini and showed them to their grandkids and said, you know what? You may have this phone that can do a GPS and take pictures and all these other wonderful things. He said, but this is what Grandpa had. But remember, our Google used to be a drawer at the library. So I'd rather see knockoffs than nothing, because eventually there will be nothing.
Right. Yeah, that's why I kind of see people at the show at the VCF, they're gutting, their computers, and a lot of people not using disk drives, right? So they got whether it's intentional or whether it's malfunctioning hardware, which often happens. A disk drive may malfunction, so somebody wants to gut it and put something in there, an SD card reader. It changes the machines over time, and yet, we can't not support these efforts in a way. I think we have to support it, even though it's different. It's not like the original, but in some way, it's helping keep this architecture
Hey,
alive.
the people who
Uh,
get into that stuff may well be coming to places like TPUG and other places, asking a whole bunch of questions. Like, it is kind of a rebirth of, I mean, remember the stuff came out, I mean, some of it was 50 years ago, um, 45 anyway. So, hey, it might put a rebirth into some of the demand for, an old CD or whatever. But, you got to remember, 1541s are crap. They were crap when they put them out, and there's still lots of them working. But as far as the reliability and the problems, I mean, Commodore could have done a whole lot better than that drive.
I'm afraid to even admit to how many of those I have. And of course, the answer is I don't know, but it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was talking with Macintosh. What was his first name?
Bruce?
Was it Bruce Macintosh? He was a
I think
member.
it was Bruce Macintosh.
I
Yeah.
don't know if it was Bruce. Anyway, maybe. But he said, well, it would be acceptable to have 41 1541s, but no more than that. And I'm pretty sure I know more than that.
I'm still using 1541s. You know,
I don't think
yeah.
it was Bruce. But anyway, I think I've
Anyway,
crossed my names up.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no, I don't think it was Bruce either. But anyway, look, they as bad as they were in terms of speed and other things, most of the ones I get still work, and if they don't, I've been able to get them to work, and I've been able to help other people keep theirs alive. And yeah, I mean, yeah, once again,
But quite honestly, the best thing Commodore ever made was either a 1701 or a 1702. Those monitors, I think, Dave, you said you found one or two ever that didn't work.
Yep.
And they used to be, if it weren't for them, the karaoke industry would never have evolved the way it did, because invariably, if you went into a karaoke place, the screen that the guy running the show had was an old 1701 or a 1702 plugged into his controlling whatever he had. It was they were amazing, and even I haven't turned the one on downstairs. I bet in 4 years. I have no doubt if I turn it on right now, it will do its little magnetic turn on the light, and I'll hook up a VCR to it, and it'll be just fine.
Yep, just bring it down.
Yeah.
Actually, those monitors became almost a standard in the TV and movie industry before they went to 16:9. And I remember I'd end up on a movie set or a TV set, and invariably somewhere, somehow, not everything, but a lot of them, there'd be some guy sitting there behind something, behind a 1702, and they're like, oh yeah, I know those monitors. And sometimes you find a whole bunch of them. And some control rooms would have like 10 or 20 or, like all the different views because they were a good picture. The other nice thing is they stacked nicely, although you had to be careful, knock them over.
Yeah.
But
Well, you'd also have to put some shielding in between them so they didn't interfere with each other with the magnetics and all the rest of it. But no, I mean, you could stack them a mile high.
actually, well, almost, but they would get a little unstable. But funny, back to that show, not hide and seek, the one at the College Street Youth Center, the hanging in. They decided, in the typical television way of doing things, that if this thing was going to make noises and speak, because there was some interaction back and forth with people, that you had to have an external speaker, so they could focus on the speaker and say, "Oh yes, that's how they're getting the sound," even though the monitor had the sound. I said, we don't need that. Well, they got this super tweeter thing. And of course, then they set it on the monitor and it throws the colors and everything to hell. And I was like, oh, no, you can't stick that there. Look at what it's doing to the screen. Oh, but they had to have a speaker. They had to.
Oh.
So I said, you know what? You send that. It doesn't matter if it works. If it's not going to work. Send it over to whatever technician. Have him rip the guts out.
What are your guys' memories of the Executive, the SX64?
Oh, I
Back in
had
the
one.
Oh yeah,
I may still have one if I could find the damn thing.
Well, remember a while ago, you picked up a 64 to me, and then you don't know where it is. So you've at least got a 64 somewhere. But
Yeah.
the SX it was a luggable. I found the handle very uncomfortable because it had those ridges.
Oh,
And
it'd rip the skin off your hand.
Yeah. So whenever I took the SX64, I always wore a leather glove, and they were good. Actually, in the pictures, because I have some original brochures that shows them with two drives, which would have been an 8 and a 9, but they didn't produce that. That was supposedly the DX64. Never came out, but I know that a fellow who's a TPUG member named Steve Gray has actually helped people create a couple of these machines. Because like the space at the top that you can put discs in was really supposed to have another drive, but they didn't do that. But
what machine? The DX64?
On the SX64, because it was only a single drive, you had another slot up above that you could store discs in because it was supposed to have a drive, but they never did that. But they were.
Well, let's face it. They never really sold many. It was a what do you call that thing? It was a bit of a white elephant. I mean, it was nice enough, but it it, it was just. I mean, it weighed 22 pounds.
At least.
But remember the Commodore commercial where he's at the pool?
Oh yeah.
And he's at the table drinking his fruity drink.
Yes, he did.
Right? Yep. So he's balling, but that showed that you could conduct business at the poolside, right?
It did.
Yeah. Oh, they were good. And you could hook up on a big monitor too. I mean, the monitor was tiny.
Yep. You could.
It was the one machine that I know of that, besides the Amiga, of course, it didn't have a cassette port because it had the drive built in. They did not put the cassette port on it. But they were good and they were handy. And mind you, here's one thing about the keyboards: those kind of key, the mechanism, does not exist on anything except an SX64. So the only way, if you break a key, is somebody somewhere has got to sacrifice a keyboard.
Oh no!
Yeah.
I don't even want to open mine up now. Now that you just
don't.
Don't
now
break the keys.
Oh no!
Don't break the keys.
That is why the world of PCs is so. I mean, you can get a keyboard from anywhere and plug it in a USB port, and you don't care. But back in those days, man, if you broke that, and they always, what was that? The edge of that plug always broke.
Oh yeah. The cable. Yeah, the cable.
The cable. Yeah.
But
they were
I think I have 7 or 8 of them.
Okay.
But I haven't turned any on in a long time. I'm sure I will have to do some more. And actually, you know what? When I was in Florida, I had the store. I got calls from people because nobody else would work on them. they call around. No, we will not touch it. We will not touch it. We will not. I said, I'll touch it. I mean, it was basically a 64. Like, I didn't like the monitors. I never liked monitors. But basically, if someone said, oh, whatever, you know what? It was a 64 with a 1541 built in. And as long as it wasn't something to do with a monitor or really the power supply, as long as it was just a regular 64 trouble or whatever.
Well, wasn't Commodore trying to compete with Osborne by doing that?
Oh, sure.
Right?
Osborne, K-Pro, trying to remember some of the other names from back then.
Oh, yeah.
But as the story of Jerry Ellsworth will tell you, they brought out the Osborne 1 and they killed themselves because they told everybody that if you like this, man, you're going to love the Osborne 2 because it's going to be way better and do all this extra stuff. So basically, everybody said, oh, great, we'll just wait for the Osborne 2. And they went bankrupt because they couldn't sell the 1.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Anyway, at some point, I will go back to them. But anyway, what was I saying about
the SX?
Yeah, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So anyway,
you were talking about repairing them in Florida?
It took longer because it was more complicated. You couldn't just take out 3 screws and look at the board. But anyone that just had either 1541 board trouble or 64 board trouble. And I mean, I was in Florida and I remember the most exotic one. A guy shipped one all the way down from Alaska. And we couldn't hook up the diagnostics because it didn't have a cassette port. But, you just slowly, methodically, look at the same symptoms, look at the whatever, figure out. And as I remember, and I would have to check, I think every chip that I remember was in a socket, which makes it a whole lot easier. Anyway, I never had one I couldn't get back going again and ship it on back.
Hey, going back to one of your earlier questions, Star Trek or Star Wars, Captain Kirk had a pet in his quarters in a Star Trek.
What?
Oh, yeah. And
in one of the Star.
Yep.
It
sat
there. They
there.
never touched it. It just sat there.
It turned it on and said Commodore Basic. It had the cursor flashing. It did nothing.
Yep.
Oh, he had one in his dressing room?
No, he had one on set in his captain's quarters, and I don't remember which movie it is.
On the set. Oh.
Yeah, it was part of the movie. There was a Commodore pet on the screen in Star Trek, one of the movies.
Oh, the pet was not the VIC-20.
No, the pet. Sorry. No, it was a pet.
Okay.
It was absolutely a pet.
A pet in Star Trek 2, right? Yeah.
Probably.
That's what somebody just said. Star Trek 2.
Okay, I'll believe you. I can remember it was there. I don't know the Star Trek series by heart and well enough to know.
No, that's beautiful. Yeah, because he had.
Yep, they appear here.
Because he had already made that connection with Commodore with the VIC-20 and doing the advertising campaign with Michael Tomchik. So it makes sense that he had.
They probably played a placement fee for it. There was another show about, oh my God, something Americans. It was maybe it was called The Americans. It had
Americans, yes, The Americans.
The Americans, and they were supposed to be out of the 80s, and occasionally you'd see their their office, the phony office between all their other spy stuff they were doing, and it was a whole bunch of Commodore stuff.
They had pets. I actually sold those pets to them for that show.
There you go.
Oh,
yeah. I just can't remember. I can't remember the actress's name, but she used to be Felicity when she was younger, and then she became whatever it is. And they had a whole bunch of pets in there.
That's cool.
You never know where they'll show up. I mean, if somebody's doing a period movie out of the 80s and they're looking for computers, if they can't find Apple IIs and XTs or whatever, then they're going to be looking for Commodore pets.
Well, just recently, and I posted on the TPUG site, I was watching an ad that took me a couple times to see it to realize it. wait a sec, that guy's got an 8032. Like it was just the back of it. So I'm sure it didn't work. There was nothing inside, but it was I think it was some kind of financial commercial of some sort. And I went, oh my. And I grabbed it. I stopped it and paused it and shot it. And somewhere on the TPUG Facebook thing, I'm sure I posted the picture of, hey, look, he's using 8032. And that was within the last year. So you never know.
I always wanted to make a pet into a bread slicer. Sure. Just open the lid, right? Put a board in there, put a nice blade, put the bread inside or outside, slide it through, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk.
Okay, Steve,
Never did it.
Sorry, I wanted to say, I wanted to give you Dr. Obsoleto's top Commodore computers and movies from the 80s. Number one, Ghostbusters, 1984. A Commodore 64 is seen in the background.
Oh, wow.
Of the Ghostbusters headquarters. Yeah.
I've got to watch it again.
And number two, GoldenEye, 1995. Boris the hacker uses a C64 keyboard as part of his workstation.
Okay.
Micromen in 2009, a film about the 1980s computer industry, features a C64. And then, of course, Hackers, 1995, a C64 appears among various computers in the hacker den. And then, of course, Stranger Things. They used the C64 in their episode 2016. But going back to the 80s, Superman 3, 1983, features a Commodore PET in the computer lab. Yeah, go look at that and freeze that frame on Superman 3. And then, of course, what I think is the most common or recognizable computer is in Tron, 1982. The
Yes.
background computer displays appear to be from a PET.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
Forgot about that.
There was somebody said something here, and it was on my screen for a second. Poof, it was gone. And there was something somebody just put up, and it was about there is a site that has such pictures, and I was just like, oh, what? And I saw it quickly, and poof, it was gone. So somebody out there.
Two more movies: Airplane 2, the sequel, 1982. In Airplane 2, a PET is seen on the spaceship's control panel. And then, going back to War Games, 1983, the main computer, while the main computer is in an MSI 8080, right?
Yeah.
PET computers are seen in the school scenes.
Oh,
so
wow.
Next time you see War Games, freeze it. You'll see some PETs.
I got the tape because I'm not going to find it many other ways.
So those are some of the features.
They didn't have Star Trek in there, eh?
No.
Interesting.
But I believe you.
There's I didn't see. There's some other questions. Someone said, did you work with any other computers while you were at high school? And the answer is, yeah, we worked with the mainframe at the Toronto board, and that's what we would use punch cards for. And then the punch cards would get read, and then the next day we'd get the things back. I was looking at.
Don't forget the TRS-80s we used to program on New Year's Eve.
Oh yes, and the Apple sometimes. I was just looking back to see who said there was a site, and I don't. Oh, no. Oh, the icon.
I never had much.
Never used the icon. That was where the Ontario government said, "Ooh, instead of using all of what we've got, we should put out our own specs and have people make these things." And I'm sure they wasted millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
But there were some people, of course.
Our teacher, Gord Mahaffey, who got us into the PET, he ended up being an icon administrator at Northern Secondary School. So in a lot of ways, it took a lot of his required teaching time away from him because he had to run this, support the icon lab.
Yeah.
But there was a ZX81.
Oh, yeah.
The Adam Acorn, was it? Or the Acorn Adam? Different ones of our friends had got into different flavors just to bug us.
You know what? It's funny. I'm just looking now at some of the. There's a fellow here, Bill G. The Sid Bolton collection is at UTM. I don't know what that is. I'm sure it's a university, but I don't know.
University of Toronto, Mississauga, maybe.
Ah, right.
I hope it's all there.
Well, Jim Butterfield's smoking jacket should be there.
I would make that trip, and that's not close for me.
And yes, it is confirmed that a Commodore PET was in the 1982 movie Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
That's right. The Wrath.
There is a scene aboard. There's a scene aboard the Starship Enterprise. You could spot a Commodore PET on a console.
We'll call that one the Wrath of Jack.
There you go.
Part of the whole reason I got into recording stuff was because of Sid Bolton. He said that they might actually at some point start kind of a thing like that, and then of course soon after that he was dead. And I think in the first one I ever said, it made reference to Sid and how he had a great T-shirt. I should get one made. It said, "It's not hoarding if you're organized."
Yeah, he was wearing that. We have pictures of him with that shirt on.
Yep.
Because we got our picture with him that day. I remember driving out there.
I think it was within 2 or 3 months he was gone.
Yeah, maybe even less. That was one of the first trips I made, longer trips away from home I made after I was recovering from losing a kidney to cancer. And I was still sort of post-surgical, but I do remember it was important enough to me. I wanted to go and see the collection and most importantly, Vicky.
Is it true that you guys use X81s for doorstops?
Well, that's what Commodore did. They'd steal the Z80 chips and then use the things, and they used the chips. They stole the chips.
They did.
And by the way, I did an episode. If you guys are interested on Man Behind the Machine, like I said, please subscribe and listen. I did a whole episode on Chernobyl. I don't know if you've seen that documentary, the docuseries. Well, it's a new recreation of what happened in Chernobyl meltdown. Anyways, if you are a fan of retro computing, there are a lot of Soviet-era computers used in the recreation of this docuseries.
Wow.
Yes, it comes highly recommended. It's a work of art, the show. So there's Chernobyl. There's a series called Chernobyl: The Real Footage, which is like 100% real footage, and you could see the flashes in the film from the radiation bleeding in. Right. This is not it. This is Chernobyl, the reenactment. So it's like a drama.
Wow.
But in doing the drama, they had to use period computers. And I believe that might be on HBO, the Chernobyl.
I'll have to look that up.
Um,
By the way, if anyone's interested, there's 20 seconds left and the Leafs are up 4-3.
What's that?
There's 20 seconds left and the Leafs are up 4-3 and the goalie's been pulled.
Oh, I didn't even know they were playing tonight.
They're playing New York Rangers and they're going to win. So there you go.
Okay.
I'm going to look up that. Oh, no, they missed the empty net. Anyway, I'm going to look up that Chernobyl thing. That's neat.
Yeah, it is cool.
But besides having the museum, I remember I was talking with Sid about how he, on occasion, productions would come to him and he would rent out stuff. And there was one, I think he talked about, it was something about the election with Dukakis and whoever beat Dukakis. Was it Bush who beat? No. Yeah, it was Bush who beat Dukakis.
It was Bush. Yeah.
I think it was Bush. Anyway, but he rented them stuff for both, like kind of campaign headquarters, and I think the Bush headquarters had like the old IBMs, and the Dukakis had the pets.
Right.
I think. Anyway, so really, if I hadn't gone to that thing at the museum, which is the only time I got to go there, although I knew about it, I don't know if I ever would have started recording anything.
Well, I think one of the saddest things was that Jim Butterfield never got to go. He was not Not well enough because he had cancer. He talked to Sid and called Sid and saw Sid in Toronto, but he actually never got to go to the museum.
Sad.
Yep.
And as far as the boss, or as Dave calls him, the creator, Jim Butterfield. What was the question I had about him? Geez, it slipped my mind. I was going to ask this question about Jim.
The guru.
Oh yeah, the creator, the guru, the boss man. He had a large hand in writing the C64 Programmer's Manual Reference Guide, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And yeah, his fingerprints are all over that thing, right?
Totally.
And
Oh yeah.
what
I mean,
what
Commodore,
else?
he had hardware that never came out. The Commodore would send him pre-production stuff all the time
Wow.
for him to bash away on.
Okay.
So I don't know if any of that got made it to the museum or if it was all returned or whatever. But oh no, he had a constant communication with Commodore. They knew that if there was a guy like, you know what, the Computer Club TPUG and the whole hotbed of Commodore stuff in Southern Ontario, which was achieved by them selling stuff to educational institutions, buy two, get one free. And they extended that to teachers and the other things. They really at one point actually knew how to market stuff. And they lost that because as you and I, we all know the Amiga never really sold that well.
And what was your guys' response to the C128 when you came out? Were you guys excited?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It was. I mean, certainly the 128 in 128 mode with the 1571 really cooking along as the 1541 should have. But I mean, the story is basically Chuck Peddle was sent home over a weekend and said, "Bring me back a disk driver, you're fired," and thus came the 1541. But you know, the 128, although it's not 100% compatible as they say, or Bill Hurd will even say that. Most everybody just said, "Oh yeah, just run it in 64 mode." So there were things that were good.
Wait. The C128 is 100% compatible, right? You're
Well, I
saying
think even
no?
Bill Hurd will say almost. Not that I know of anything that doesn't, but I think that it's as close as 100% as you can get. And if something doesn't work, they say, "Yeah, well, I guess that's the one thing." I don't know of
Yeah.
anything.
And then you just run it in 64 mode anyway.
Well, no, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. You had to. No. Yeah, 64 mode is what a lot of people end up using. Now,
Yeah.
the 80 columns was nice on in the 128 mode. You needed to get a different monitor, mostly. Um, well, they were. It was good. I mean, it was really the last gasp before the end of the line,
Yeah.
and certainly the case was pretty, and
Yeah. I
and
Right.
don't
see,
think I ever owned one. I certainly had access to them ever here and
I
there, but
remember. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah,
no, I was gonna say as far as the 80 columns, my favorite thing that ever came out of batteries included, other than the bus card and the bus card 2 and all that, was the BI-80 card, which plugged in to a 64 and gave you an 80 column screen.
it is.
It's interesting that Commodore chose to include CPM with the
I was just
120.
gonna say, see, well, I remember Chris Bennett, who was the business manager of TPUG, and people said, "Well, why did they do that?" And he basically would take out his hand as if he had a chip in it, and go like he plugged in and say, $5. That's what it cost to add it. So they did. But really,
Holy cow!
it, it
Really?
was it was not
I
something that
don't remember anybody I ever knew, using that
they
part of
went
it.
to a whole lot of trouble though, because supposedly at that first CES show where they had the overheating machines, they had to whisk in and out and bring back and forth. They told people, bring your CPM disc. The 1571 will read it, and supposedly they
It
did.
did.
But still, it was. I guess at the time, it was thought to be a big deal. Even even the 64, when they put out that first Christmas demo, where it came up and did all the magical stuff, it said CPM option. And there was a cartridge, I guess, for it. But
Oh,
really,
that's right too.
nobody used it.
No.
But that's also, the 1570 RAM expander, from what I remember from Bill Hurd's
Yeah.
story is, they get to CES and there's all these posters saying 640K. Well, they didn't have any RAM expander. They had no intention of. But that basically meant 128 plus another 512 because that's what the IBMs have 640K. I remember that number always being thrown around. And they were like, oh. So I remember and the thing I heard him say is, well, he sat down and he started designing a 512K RAM expander because the marketing people had said, oh, yeah, 640K, woo. This is one of the reasons I got out of all this stuff because there's, the marketing people are like, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, sure, we got 640K. And you're like, I don't have 640K. And really, the RAM expanders were helpful for some things, but not a whole lot of people use them. The best thing ever was the 1764 RAM expander, and not because it was any good or that many people used it. They realized if we plug that into a 64, it'll go kaboom because the power supply that came with the 64 won't handle it. So we'll have to send a good power supply along. So when you bought a 1764, you got essentially a Commodore 128 power supply that had the right end for the 64, and you probably never had to worry about a power supply ever again. Did you ever really use the RAM expander? Well, probably not. I think some BBS people did and other people, but it, it was one of those things that people were, oh yeah, this is cool. But if you wrote something with it and you tried to, if somebody else didn't have the RAM expander, they couldn't use it. So I'm sure it was something that, I'm sure they sold a bunch and people were like, oh yeah, this is cool. But it really, was just one other kind of like Comal, another little fringe thing. Where people are like, oh yeah, this is cool. By the way, the Comal machine I speak of that somebody gave to Jim Butterfield, I
Yeah.
think they brought it over from Denmark or whatever. I have the Comal machine.
Whoa.
Now, does it work? No. And it's funny, I had never looked inside of it until maybe the past 3 or 4 years or so. And I thought, oh yeah, there's some ROM. There's just, an EEPROM in there. That's all there is. Oh no. This has 2 boards very much in the same configuration of a Super Pet.
Whoa.
It is a beast in there. Now I have never experimented with it. I've never tried to plug those boards into a working 8032. I've never done it. I was like,
And it doesn't turn on? The
no,
Comal machine? doesn't turn on?
I've never really had a chance to explore it, but I will. But oh yeah, it's an 8032 with kind of like the Super Pet, but it's not the Super Pet. 2 more boards inside.
Wow.
And I don't even know how many of them there are out there. But I got that when we helped Jim move.
Yep, we did.
His wife said that when they were expecting, or maybe I guess they were still expecting, she decided that her daughter was going to have a nice house.
And they moved. Were they on Brunswick? Can't remember. But I know that they moved to Ontario Street
Yeah.
because we moved them.
Yep, we helped along.
And Susanna, is that right?
I think it is.
She was just a little tyke.
She would now be about the same age as
So
Kyle.
how many kids did Jim Butterfield have?
One.
Okay, did she go into programming at all, or
No clue.
no? Okay.
He'd be
By
what?
the way,
30.
She'd be about the same age as Kyle.
Okay, so about 37. Yeah.
So the one thing I do know is what was I saying about her? No, I remember her mother once told me she was doing something, but it didn't sound like computer stuff at all. But
He was
as I
very
said,
shy.
I only met her when we were getting the car and when we were helping them move, and that was pretty much.
She didn't come to his memorial. She didn't want to be like she didn't want to be fawned over as the daughter of the famous Jim Butterfield. She was very shy.
Well, if Jim hadn't worked at CN Telecommunications, because that's where he met his wife.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
if he hadn't been there, he never would have been. And certainly I don't remember how old he was when he told me that they were expecting, but certainly he was well into his 40s, if not more.
Yep.
Well, I think it's a good place to stop unless you guys have anything more.
I want somebody to tell me that they still have an Apple core on a necklace, because they used to ship those with the 64s when they had their Apple or Commodore Eats the Apple. I wish I still had mine.
You're hurting me because
Tell me more about this necklace.
It was like an apple core. It looked like an eaten apple. It was on a brown string. And the reason I am pained by this is because my first wife, and maybe this is one of the reasons that we're not together, I had this tiny little thing sitting on a shelf somewhere without consulting or anything. She decided that she would throw it out.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, Commodore had this. Again, their marketing in the early days. Remember, I adore my 64, my Commodore 64.
And Commodore 64 ate the apple.
Eats the apple, ate the apple. And they actually sent in the box you got.
The first 10,000.
The first 10,000 had this little Apple core necklace.
Yep, Paul Higginbottom told me that story.
Which is really weird when you think about where, what ended up happening with Apple. And of course, its symbol, which of course its symbol is because of Alan Turing, the infamous, there's the movie about him, right? Who broke the code, who broke the Enigma codes. And then he died by suicide by biting into a poisoned apple. And that's why the Apple symbol is an apple with a bite out of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I wish I still had that thing, and I was just so enraged when my first wife decided, oh yeah, you didn't need that. It's taking up no space. It's no trouble. It's no problem. Oh yeah, I threw that out.
And there were 10,000 of them, and I'll bet.
That was it.
Anyway.
But they had an ad that was in magazines, and it had very prominently a huge. They had all these things about, we put the 64 and we put the Apple together and da 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 da. And there was in the middle of the thing this great big picture of an apple core because the 64 had eaten the apple.
Yep.
And it had, but anyway, that's still a sore spot.
I know I had one, but I have no idea if I still do.
Well, I know I did, and I know I'm never going to find it.
Were you guys exposed to the Apple at high schools or schools? They
a friend who had one? Darren
Alexander had one, and you know what? We would go over to his house, and he had a pool table, and his down below they had converted the garage, and the deal was you play pool, and when you lost, you switched places with the guy who was upstairs typing in the program from the magazine.
But that was also his first one was a TRS-80.
Oh yeah,
he had the first Trash 80 we ever worked on, because I remember you had to. It worked off a regular cassette drive, like you could get a cassette drive for a realistic cassette. It didn't have a specific drive, and if you didn't have the volume set to the right settings, it wouldn't load programs. Like it was, at least what we had didn't have those variables. But yeah,
Trash 80.
Yep.
But Trash 80, it could plug it basically had the audio, the mono audio cord coming out of it, and you put it into a cassette deck, and that's where you saved your programs and hope they saved.
I think they saved okay, but if you didn't have the volume set right going back in, you had to diddle around. But and after he got the Trash 80, I said, "Oh no, don't do that." And the thing that bugged me so much about the TRS-80 is you bought it and it was expensive, and then, but if you wanted to expand it, you could buy the expansion box.
Yep,
now, the expansion box didn't actually expand it. It just gave you like the ports that the pet already had. So You could spend
Yeah.
about as much as the computer again, no memory, no anything. It just then allowed you to add more.
Yeah, it was.
And I was like, oh my God, like we've got the cassette port, we've got the user port, we've got all these things. What are you doing? And I thought I had him convinced that the next time that he should get either a 64 or whatever. Oh no,
He bought an Apple
he
II.
got an Apple II, and it wasn't a clone, it was a real one. But anyway, that
Yeah.
was where we would go over there and probably indulge in adult beverages before we were of age and play pool, sometimes ping pong. And the loser would go and type in the programs from the magazines that wouldn't work,
Yeah.
and we'd have to wait till the next 2 or 3 months to get, the next version.
Back in the days of the BBSs, you could always tell who had the Apple computer because if you didn't buy an extra card, you only got uppercase, and
That's
so
right.
they were
Hilarious.
they were typing at you, and you thought they were always yelling at you, but in fact, you'd say, "Oh no, it's just an Apple user."
That's hilarious.
Um,
And did you guys go on CompuServe at all, or?
Not very much.
Well, you know
Very
what? But there's a whole other horrible TPUG story because TPUG was going to, it was on Delphi. TPUG was going to do a thing on Delphi, and I think there was a little flirting with CompuServe, but it ended up we are going to go on Delphi, and somebody who I won't mention her name, but Louise Redgers, gathered a bunch of people around because TPUG was going to do this Delphi thing to the benefit of TPUG and the community, and Louise Redgers, but I won't mention her name. Decided that she and other people who were involved in TPUG but wouldn't want to do it under TPUG presented a competing bid with the Delphi people that they should do it rather than the club should do it. And I don't remember exactly how that all played out.
I don't either, but
certainly
Was Delphi a BBS?
it was like another CompuServe thing. It was another big, like basically there was CompuServe, Delphi, and then along came America Online.
Yeah.
oh
And then
god,
there was Quantum
Yeah,
Link.
but Delphi must have been popular in Canada, right?
No, it was in the States a lot.
Oh, was it?
They were all like just basically big networky things. But that was, that was it. It's hard to think that someone there is there working for TPUG, but yet trying to snag that whole deal out from under the club.
Jeez.
And but that, as I said, there were, you know what, there were a lot of great people around TPUG. Like there was the OS9 project on the Super Pet.
yes,
And all
What
the
was that about?
well,
What was OS9 about?
there was another board that added to the Super Pet that let you do more languages.
wasn't that Gary Gold?
Barry Gold, Arnie Krauss,
Yes,
and others. It was a huge undertaking that they did, and really it was all, yep, okay, we're doing it. It was all just part of the club thing. And then there were the scoundrels who somehow wanted to profit on their own and use their connection to, like, it's funny because I was in that Amiga club in Sarasota, and if people asked me to bring things to meetings instead of them coming to the store, I would. But I wouldn't show up and say, "Hey, look, we got a whole bunch of stuff to sell here." I was, everybody knew I ran the store, and if they wanted something, I would happily bring it. We would happily do it. But unlike, the story, not to mention again, but Louise Redgers, who was, just one of the scoundrels.
So
And
tell me more about OS9 and Louise Richards.
I don't know much about it. I know it was a TPUG thing, and supposedly, if you look online somewhere, somebody is still recreating a board or whatever it was that you can add it to your Super Pet. Actually, I think. Hang on, let me just glance
I
at
think
this.
Steve Gray has one of those, maybe.
I don't know. Oh.
I know they got it working.
Super OS9 is here. TPUG has implemented the popular 6809 operating system OS9 on the Super Pet. Super OS9 greatly expands the software availability and the hardware compatibility of the Super Pet while preserving access to the Waterloo languages and programs. The cost of OS 9 to club members is $210 Canadian plus $10 shipping handling. Ontario residents at 7% BST.
Wow.
What does it offer? A true disk operating with features found on Unix systems and on the Amiga. I didn't even know. Multitasking, multi-user
Oh, yeah.
capability, extensive software. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Unix, huh?
here's the ad.
Oh, sweet.
Super OS 9 is here.
Holy
So
cow.
this, and supposedly it's still somebody is recreating this, but TPUG did it. It is, if you're on a 3-board Super Pet and wish to acquire,
What
I don't know,
what is wait, somebody's doing it a new project of the
I-
time?
well, the fellow I know who, it's funny, his at the last World of Commodore, he demonstrated Super Pet things. His name's Rudy, of Rudy's Retro Intel from Wasega.
Yeah.
And see, I had, oh, here's another grand story. I saw there was some stuff at basically a pawn shop out in Oshawa. And I was like, oh no, I can't get more stuff. But there was a printer just like the printer that I still have that works. And of course, well, I gotta have another one. So anyway, I called them and I arranged to get it. It was only like $49.95, but it supposedly didn't work, and it doesn't. And have I ever looked at it? Well, no. But anyway, they had other stuff, including a Super Pet. So I called Rudy because he'd been interested, and he was interested. So I show up there the next day. It was a Saturday, and it was cold and whatever. And sure enough, who do I see there? Another guy from TPUG. I was like, oh. Anyway, he did have somebody who was interested in the Super Pet, but we all talked, and it was decided that because I did try turning on and it wasn't working. That okay, fine, let Rudy get it. So Rudy then got it and it agonized for months over this thing, and there were some things he didn't know that didn't help him, like you have to have this special wire on the bottom of the board for the pet. But anyway, he finally got it working, and he has since created. And he kept looking online for documentation. There was no documentation on what to do. So he has created a manual for the 2-board and the 3-board Super Pet based on his agony. And one of the things I did is I sent away with him other boards and other machines and other stuff that he had something to test with. So he now has created these 2 manuals that they're available free online for people who are trying to fix their Super Pet. But also, he was the one who told me, back to the OS 9, it's coming back around, that he was interested in that, and he had searched online, and somewhere somebody is recreated or done whatever, that if you did want to get the OS 9 option for the Super Pet that the TPUG created, that someone out there is still doing it. And who? I don't know. But that would be, go to Google.
What was your first experience with Geos and Jiffy DOS?
Geos, hated it. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why.
What? Really?
I went, well, you know what? It took a nice machine that I knew everything about and turned it into this foreign beast with oh, yes, look, we have a mouse thing. But I'll tell you what really pissed me off. I went out to that show in San Francisco to speak. I had 2 or 3 slots to speak about things. So I get there, and it's time for me to go on. And here's this goober up there demonstrating Geos. And he won't stop. Now, is he showing anything interesting? Not terribly. He's just going through every option in every pull-down menu. Not that anything works together or it doesn't. Like there's no sort of, okay, so we want to do this, but it was just like, and he wouldn't get off. He absolutely wouldn't get off. So finally, the guy who was, the moderator or whatever said, look, like you're halfway into this guy's time. Like, oh, so he finally reluctantly left. So I start talking about modems and terminal programs and things. Well, who's scheduled to speak right after me? The same goober. He shows up early, and he's demanding that they get me off there so he can keep talking about Geos.
Oh,
and
God.
I'm going to say a bad word. Because I had the room full of people. I was just getting into this whole thing about there was a great program. It was called Third Term. It was a public domain thing. And we were really getting, but really, like I was supposed to have an hour. He'd stolen half an hour, and now he is being a goof because he wants me to get off the stage. And
Wow.
I turned to the crowd and said, look, I may have to cut this short because Mr. Gios is back. And back in the back of the room was some little old man. And this is where I'm going to swear. And he screamed out, fuck him! Anyway, I kept on going. And the moderator, I took him outside and said, look, you kind of stole his time, so, get over it. But you know what? I just found, now maybe it was better on the 128, but it took the 64 that I knew like an old friend and turned it into this alien with this slow moving, slow motion mouse and all. And it was like, no. So I've never been a fan of it. Now, as I say, maybe with a 128 and a 1750 RAM expander, which I think Geoff took advantage of, maybe it would be better. And who knows, someday, maybe I'll experiment with it because I probably have Geoff 128.
Oh man, I really touched a soft spot there.
I think it found a happy home in grade 1, like in schools, where they were actually able to put a mouse in a kid's hand and eliminate the keyboard connection a little, some other. Anyway, but I never really formed.
Is it because Macintosh Classic?
Oh,
They're
sure.
because they're going towards a graphical interface.
Oh, yeah, sure. It was like,
And-
Mac has a graphical interface. We have to do it. We have to
Yeah.
do the same. So they did. And, I'm sure for some brand new people who didn't want to poke 53280, and 53281 to change the screen and do whatever, because it gave you this nice gray whatever thing. I'm like, yeah, well, this is cool. This is great. But for we who'd been around a while, it was like, oh no. And really, that experience at that San Francisco show, like, I was calm, and I didn't have to say anything because the little old man in the back took care of it.
Yeah.
And that guy heard it loud as could be.
What did you guys think? That's a hilarious story. What last question? What did you guys think of the Jackintosh? When Jack Trammell left and they released the
the Atari ST stuff.
the Jackintosh.
What I remember the Amiga bouncing ball demo.
Yeah.
Okay, so they had that going on, and then out comes the here's the thing it's going to show. Oh yeah, we're really great. We can do a bouncing ball too. So then out came an Amiga demo with a whole bunch of bouncing balls really quickly, because apparently for the bouncing ball on the Amiga was just kind of loping along at like nothing. And here's the Atari, which is working every ounce of everything to get the same bouncing ball going. So then Amiga came out with one that had a whole bunch of bouncing balls, so there was no way the Atari could do that. And it's funny because when I did work a little while at Electronics 2001 when they were on Yonge Street, and they decided that they would get the Ataris in, and some people didn't like that. But the reason, and it was Meyer Tool who said, no, we're going to have them here so we can show them side by side. Because what was happening is people come in to look at an Amiga and then say, well, I'm going to go look at the Atari. And then we never see them again. So I guess because they got sucked in. So anyway, he said, no, we're going to have the Atari thing here so we can show them side by side. And so that they wouldn't go off and get it somewhere else or get sucked into something else. That they would.
They could see how crappy it was right here.
Yeah. Yep. It's funny. There's a lot of people in all kinds of. As I said, one of the reasons I didn't mind getting out of the computer thing, when Amiga DOS was upgraded to 1.3. I remember there was a guy at and we got all these things in, and we got bunches of them. And it was like I guess it was like new ROM, a new Kickstart ROM and discs. And there was a guy who worked there, and I won't mention him. I won't. I'm not going to. I could. I won't. Anyway, but he would say, oh, yes, we can sell these, but only to our customers. And I was like, you know what? Anybody who comes in and wants to buy one, we got enough.
Yeah.
We can make them our customer. Instead of, hi, how you doing? I'd like to get 1.3. Did you buy your Amiga here? No, get out.
Get out. Get out.
So,
You get out of my store right now.
You,
so I
if you,
did.
there was a guy I knew had a sign on his desk that said, "If you don't serve and service your customer, they will find somebody else to do it for them." And there's
Oh,
nothing more true. You have to look. Customer service is so underrated, and it can never be underrated.
Oh yeah,
You,
you know what? I never paid attention to what that guy said. I would just make sure we had a code that would something about when somebody came in who hadn't bought their Amiga there, John was not to deal with them. And there was I don't remember what the code word was, but it was something where somebody needed John in the back or something, and we get him the hell out of there. But I guess he wasn't the manager, but he was supposedly thought he was wonderful. But we would sell to whoever, because really the store was making money on the upgrades. Everybody needed the upgrades, and when they come in and they're treated nicely, they came back, and a lot of those people did come.
the elitist retro computer salesman. You get out of here right now. We're not selling to you. We
hey,
only have a certain
hang
amount
on.
of selling to our own people.
Batteries included. Jim Butterfield's story. When floppy disks came out, Jim went to Batteries Included, which was run by Alan and Robbie, and I can't remember their sister's name. The Croft chicks ran that store. And basically, Jim went in and he bought like literally one of their first 5.25-inch floppy disks, an individual disc. And I don't remember if it was Alan or Robbie behind the counter. He paid whatever it was. It's probably $10 for one disc back. Who knows? Anyway, and he proudly put it into a bag, slipped the receipt around it, and drove a staple through it, including
Yeah.
through the disc.
Yep.
And Jim just looked at him because he had no idea. He had just put a staple right through the floppy disk that Jim Butterfield just bought.
Oh my God.
And then he realized what he had done.
I would suspect he gave him another.
He gave him another disc, and I'm quite sure he did not staple his receipt to the bag.
I would like to think they got rid of the damn staple.
That's a great story.
Yeah, that Jim Butterfield told me that and whoever it was probably Robbie. He was so proud to have sold like one of their first floppy disks. And yep, well, that was a write-off. There was a write-off for the stock.
I bet you that guy was fired after Jim left.
He owned the place.
Oh.
There was Ellen and Robbie. It was a family business. I actually worked there for a little while. Alan and Robbie and Mark. Oh, I can't remember the sister's name. Their mom worked the phones there. I don't remember if their dad worked there, but hey, they developed pay-per-click and they developed the Oracle, which was a database program written by Dieter Demmer.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It didn't sell. Paperclip sold lots. The Oracle, I don't think it ever really did that well.
I know we got to go, but I have a Batteries Included story. They had the dongle. You had to have the key that went in the cassette port.
It was actually in the joystick port.
Joystick port, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so they have the paperclip one. Then they came out with Oracle, and they said, "Okay, we need a new dongle." So they made one to go into the other port. They didn't check when they had first made them, but the case around the one, if they use the same one, of course, they couldn't. You could put them both in together.
So they had to shave them.
They had to shave them with a bandsaw. So if you ever see an Oracle key, the one side is flat, and it wasn't much, just a little bit, but they had to shave the so the paperclip ones are always nice and smooth and whatever, and the Oracle one, I guess it's the upper side. I think it is the upper side. Maybe I don't remember. Anyway, but it's like sharp. Like, oh look, this like it's been cut. Well, that's because it's been cut.
Yeah, things that people don't think of, before they manufacture something. But one of the rules of Batteries Included is they would make any product because they always with the BI-80 card and the bus card and bus card 2 and that there was this little plastic box that went around the circuit board, and their basic rule was, we will consider manufacturing anything as long as it fits in that box. And the same with the keys. Like the key had to fit in that little dongle box.
Well, look, I mean, Richfield Telecommunications, they would make anything as long as they could use those amp connectors. It was a very different thing. Like the C-Link, which I think I have here, fit inside. Just a second. Oh, I can walk. Where'd it go? I don't know. Well, there's a bus card. There's a bus card too. But I know I had a C-Link around here. And Peter Smith's thing, he had these funny little connector things that were amp connectors.
Yep.
Oh, I had it here.
So their stuff was always smaller.
Yep, because they said it's got to fit. And even, hang on, I've almost got it. I've got to pick another thing up here. Oh, look, it's an Epix Fast Load cartridge. Okay, here is an RTC link, and there is the amp connector. Everything had to, that's what they used. I don't know if they got a million of them or they got whatever, but they, even the V-Link, which is for the VIC-20, it had to be way bigger to go into the cartridge port. And the circuit board was massive compared, but still the guts were contained in the.
Shaved it down and put the guts in that connector. Yep.
Yep. I recently found one that actually works. So, and that was, that was too ingenious, because when the 64 came out, people didn't want to spend, like, oh, gee, I've got a 64 and I've got a 4040, and they didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on a crappy 1541. They wanted to use their dual drives. So in would go the link. And you know what? This is something I didn't even realize. But I'm thinking back, it was brilliant in that if you wanted to use a serial drive with a C-Link, all you had to do was type in serial and you could use them. So for BBS people, and if you wanted IEEE, you type in IEEE and it gave you basic 4. But so for bulletin board people,
the basic 4 was huge into that cartridge.
Oh yeah. But the basically bulletin board people who needed drives and storage and stuff, you get a C-Link and you can hook up your 9090s, 9060s, all the big drives, but still you could have 4 serial drives connected too. Because if you had something set up where, like the 1581 or whatever, all you had to do in the program, and it would work in the program, is say serial and have it go off and get the stuff off the serial drive. So oh my golly, you could have, without doing anything crazy, you could have 8 different drives connected to a 64 to run your bulletin board on. With 4 IEEE, 4 serial, and it was all just happy as could be. It was. This one here is a later version. Actually, these things, the later versions of these, I think ended up being, oh, there goes Bill G. See you, Bill. These things actually ended up being like network things, in that in a classroom, if a whole bunch of classes, then it would let them share a drive and they would not fight. I really haven't used the later. I had the early one. There was no wires. There was no anything. You just plugged it in and away it went.
ComSpec made a kind of thing too.
Microshare.
Yeah, but there was also a software one too.
But ComSpec made great stuff.
Yes, they did.
And it's funny how, in Southern Ontario, we had RTC making great stuff. We had batteries making great stuff. We had ComSpec making great stuff. But, what ComSpec was best at? Their cases were the best. Like, they didn't have the funny little amp connectors or the funny little BI-80 kind of, whatever. They made good stuff. I remember Amiga 1000 RAM expansion things. You get them. There were some people who made them. It literally looked like they'd gone out in the back, taken a hammer, smashed the metal over the thing, and you could get 2 or 3 of them of the, because you had to add everything on the Amiga 1000 had to go on the outside. The things weren't the same height. They wouldn't line up. They were horrible. ComSpec made good cases with nice little feet. If you had to add 3 or 4 of them, they lined up just tickety boo, and they were just dandy. Not like some of these, literally like hack jobs. I mean, they worked, but it'd be a battle to, okay, well, what order can we put these on that, we don't have it hanging and snapping the board, and,
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
how we used to buy a memory back in the day and plug them in, right?
oh yeah,
With memory sticks. Now there's a guy at the Vintage Computer Festival Midwest who sells keychains from old memory chips.
ah,
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
He figured out how to switch it up.
keychains.
Yeah,
Hey,
keychains.
when I put an old, when I was in high school, I don't remember what chip it was. I drilled a hole through a chip and put it on my keychain 40 years ago. And it didn't work, I assure you. But
Yeah,
that's how nerdly I was.
I have a broken pound key from a C64 that I want to drill and put on my keychain. Because I don't want to just throw the key away,
no.
you know? And I replaced it with another 64. So there's a way we could keep these things alive, huh?
I've
Yeah.
always thought with some of the old keys, because I also collect pins and buttons and things, and I have, where is it? I created this recently. I had my old hat that was like a baseball hat, but it was like getting beyond. But anyway, I recently took a bunch of the buttons and my things from TPUG things, and I put them on here. But I always thought another thing that would be cool to do with some of the keys that are excessive or whatever is to turn them into like pins that you could put on a hat and maybe even spell things out like Commodore 64 or whatever. Now it's as if you have enough parts around and dead keyboards and things. But even just like the Commodore logo pin or like the Commodore logo like key, there must be a way, and I will find it to, like, even no matter how badly broken it is, get it sorted out that there's a nice flat spot down there that you can glue a pin back on and then stick it on and say there.
Yeah, there was one of my friends has like a little C64 on a keychain that was being sold by a German company for a while. You can't find them anymore, but they're pretty.
Yeah, there was a Commodore 64 keychain with like a gold or copper colored. I might even have one. There might even been a silver one too. I'm not sure. I might have one of those somewhere, but I can't put my hand on it today.
And I don't think it was 3D printed.
Oh no, this was old, 40 years old. It was flat on the back. It might have said Commodore or something on the back. I don't remember, but it looked like the keyboard of a Commodore 64.
That's cute. Look at that thing. Look at it.
There it is.
Oh, is that it?
Got one?
That's one.
Oh,
But the other thing of it is it doesn't say Commodore 64 on it.
no.
It says, does it say Commodore? I can't. Oh, I need reading done. I don't think it even says a name. So really, this could be. Where are you? It could be a VIC-20. It could be a 64, or it could be a Commodore 16. On the back, it says Commodore Computer, the ultimate personal computer. What the heck? At the unbeatable price. But if I remember, I've looked really closely, and it does not specify which of those three machines that it is. But yes, that also sits here in, where is it? The light in the pet room. And I might have another one around somewhere. I think I actually used one and probably got worn, and maybe the thing broke off. Or this one has not been used. And I'm sure somewhere in the box I'll find another.
I think about the only thing I have one of one is when we ran the Nortec BBS one year, we had some money left over and we got buttons made. Little tiny red button that said Nortec BBS 4872593. I was going to take it and give it to the museum when we visited for the Butterfield Day, and I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't because I still have it. We had 300 of them made. I'm pretty sure I have the one.
Oh, really?
I have one.
Can
You have
look,
one?
Can you look at your screen?
Okay, maybe I've got one of two. How many do you have?
I don't think a whole bunch, but I think
No,
as I was tidying up around here today, I saw another one.
I didn't know any of them had survived.
Oh, please. I'm sure I saw another one around here.
That's all right.
I'm sure. I just don't. I don't know where I got it right now. But as I was sort of getting ready, I said, "Oh, look, a Nortec button." I believe.
Well,
I do remember
yes,
on April 1st, we published on the BBBBS
yeah.
that Commodore there'd been this long-standing problem, I think, with the user port or something, that that Commodore had fixed the problem because they had redesigned the board to move the 6522 chip closer to the port. And of course, it was a total April Fool's joke. But I've heard over the years, not lately, but over the years, more people thinking that that was true.
Yep.
But it was not.
Yep. Got to move those chips closer together.
Yeah, no, just move it closer to the port. That'll speed it up.
We also did one about how you could copy discs on the subway. And that was it would copy protected discs. If you put them together, because there was such a big electrical field on the Toronto subway, that if you took them on and put them right next to each other in like a, I think we had specifications on the bag too. But keep in mind, if there was, because there was this stuff on copy protected thing called half tracking and other stuff. If you knew the disc had half tracking, you had to kind of bounce around in the seat a little bit.
Yeah, and people believed it.
Oh yeah, they did.
Yep. Well, even Zoom copy can't crack some disks. Apparently, they're still, copy protected. So, I don't know. Any workarounds?
Well, it's funny. There's a fellow, and I've got to get his drives back to him, and things kind of fell apart. And I will get the back to him, but he said there is some program that will copy everything, but there was one company, and they made a word processor really good, but they spent so much time on copy protection, they eventually went out of business. Word Writer, I think it was, and they actually had on the disk different formats.
Oh,
of some sort. I don't know what, I don't know how, but they did. This was part of their copy protection. But they spent so much energy and time and everything on all that they did, and maybe they wouldn't have anyway. I mean, what is a word processor? Type it in and then you can edit, you can change things, you can format things. And Word Writer supposedly is damn near impossible to copy because of this different formats they use.
I'd often wondered whichever. I know Word Pro was big and Word Paperclip was big. I always wondered which one sold more.
Well, Word Pro was first.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't better.
Oh no. And you know what? Paperclip. It's funny. They came out and the Word Pro. There was very few printers around, and you could pick from a list, but that was it. And it was Paperclip who waited a while and came out, and they had printer files that saved a whole lot of RAM.
Oh yeah.
Word Pro had to have all that stuff in there about all the different printers. And it was after that Steve Hunter changed it so that Word Pro had
printer files.
Which of course now, I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, you plug your thing in and the plug and play, and it goes and downloads the driver. But I don't know who. I would suspect that Paperclip did that. Near the end of their run, they said, you know what? We're spending so much on these damn keys. Why are we bothering? We'll make more. So they stopped having.
They stopped making the dongles.
Stopped having the dongle key thing, which I probably have around here somewhere, but I can't think of where. cannot.
Yeah, but looking back, they could have avoided that whole problem with the dongle thing if they just bought a keyboard, a joystick extension cable, or a Y of 3 inches.
Yeah.
They could have just thrown that in the box.
Mind you, from what I understand of those dongles, if you put a paddle reader in, it would tell you some value.
And that was it. Yeah.
So, well, you just had to get the paddle, put it in, set it at the right value, and you were okay.
Yeah.
Mind you, the paddles were kind of sketchy and jump around a bit. Just had to make sure you didn't touch it. Yep. You know what?
Oh.
I know we got to go, but let me tell you one last story. House of Computers. Does anybody remember them? They were on Eglinton. They were the ones that allegedly were copying Flight Simulator 2, and not just the discs, everything.
Yep.
Has everybody heard this story? Anyway, what happened was they were and the manuals were huge. They were copying the manuals, they were copying the disc. There was even the talk that maybe somebody at Commodore was helping them copy the disc. But they got caught because at some point, Flight Simulator 2 changed the color of the warranty card,
And they didn't.
and they didn't know about it, so they didn't do it. So in comes all these warranty cards, months and months after. And the Flight Simulator 2, I guess Sublime was like, oh, what's this? We got rid of those like 6 months ago or whatever. And then that began the investigation. So it's funny, the program sold for, I think, close to $100. And certainly recreating the bind, recreating the man, recreating everything certainly must not have been cheap, but I guess it was cheaper than buying them.
Yep.
So I do believe they got in, allegedly. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Allegedly, but I think they did get in some trouble. And I think maybe it was not long after that, maybe House of Computers closed.
Might be. Well, my last thing would be never play with poke on a fat screen anyway. Poke 59595.
Oh no, don't say it.
Never play with that poke because it won't be too long before you actually fry your monitor.
Yep.
Never ever play with that one.
Don't even say it out loud.
Well, no, don't. Too late.
I didn't hear that. But I tell you, one of the things I have here, last thing about House of Computers, I still have a T-shirt from them that says the pet, Commodore Pet House of Computers, and on the back it says famously, peek, but don't poke.
Yeah.
It's
Peek,
light
but
blue.
don't poke.
It's light
That's
blue.
awesome.
It's hanging here, and I used to wear it all the time. And it's not worn too badly considering.
Well, I wanted to thank you guys. It's getting late. We'll have to continue. Maybe we could do part 2 another time. See, this
Well, I
is
think
what-
we did. I think we've done part 1 and 2. The next one will probably have to be 3.
Oh, part 3. Yeah. But thank you.
Yeah,
Dave.
maybe break it down into a number of different
Yeah.
things.
Thank you, Richard, Dave, everybody for joining. I got Gemini AI taking notes for these. What was it? What are we on? 3.5 hours? Yeah. So Gemini's taking notes. Yeah.
How many pencils are broken in the midst of all this?
I don't know, but
Or maybe they're probably typing.
yeah, it's summarizing it, so I'll be able to do another episode just summarizing the this meeting, and
It'll
then
be interesting to see what it comes up with.
Yeah, but I'll share it in the TPUG group. The
Sure.
highlights. I'll do a highlights episode.
Were there any highlights?
Oh, there's a lot.
But just keep in mind that even though we've talked about a lot of things, it's just scratching the surface.
Scratching the surface, yeah. It started with 1,100 disk images spanning various Commodore systems. Does that ring a bell?
Well, that would be what the TPUG CD.
Oh yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yep.
And
And then of course, how did I find a pet? Space Invader.
Space Invaders. Oh,
Space
no.
Invaders. I remember the
Also,
room.
I have
I
to
remember-
mention. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No. Go
No,
ahead.
I was going to say my
Oh, I
favorite.
just-
Go ahead.
Okay, I just say I remember the room where I saw the pet, and it was not the traditional place that they were in the school because they had them on a cart. Do you remember what room it was, Richard?
Oh my God,
As you came into
109?
Northern Secondary, I don't remember the
What?
room number, but I remember when
109? I know, right in the
came
corner.
into the school, the corner of the building at the south end.
Yep.
Right there in the room immediately on the left. I never had a class in there. I don't know why I peeked in, but there was Space Invader.
Yep.
Space Invaders. If you
And
have a
then
chance.
and then artillery and dam busters
Oh yeah.
Oh.
and rat race.
Anyway, let the doctor speak.
No, I was going to say one of my favorite games for the pet is Robin. Robin, Harbon. You know Robin. Harbon. Harbron. Robin Harbron.
It doesn't ring a bell.
I'm kind of striking out there too.
You guys know him. He does 8-bit show and tell.
Oh yeah.
Robin,
Okay.
Robin. You
All
guys
right.
know Robin?
Yeah, I know.
Yes. So Robin showed me one year he made a game for the pet called RPG Mini May.
Oh,
I was hooked. It is one of my favorite games for the pet. If you can get here, let me see. Do you want to? I could find it. I think it's on CSTB. Here, let me give you this. Pet Mini May.
Hmm.
Here, let's see where if I could find it here. If you guys can play it, you really would love it. It's fun. It's kind of like
and it runs on a. Did you say it was on a pet?
yeah,
Okay.
yep, and it's kind of like Legend of Zelda for pet.
Oh my.
I couldn't put it down. For some reason I can't find it. He gave me
That's
a
okay.
copy. He gave me a copy on 5 1/4, but I'm gonna reach out to him and see where it is on CSTB or somewhere.
Post a link.
But wow, it's been a great night.
I think I have a pet or two around. Once I recover from the smoking one, then I'll carry on with other experiments.
I'll have
Yeah,
to. I'd have to do an excursion to try it, but I'd love to try it.
Just bring all your Commodore stuff down at the time. It's just going to waste it.
Yeah.
Especially if you find the apple.
Yes.
Oh,
Uh,
if I find an
live
apple,
long and
if,
prosper.
Yeah,
if I find an apple on a string, it's not coming.
I know. By the way, that thing you do with your fingers, I can't do that.
You can't do that.
I can't do that.
No, I can't
By
do it
the
either.
way, speaking of the Apple II, somebody showed me their clear case. It's pretty cool.
Oh wow.
Somebody made a clear case for the Apple II with LEDs blinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
like a gamer's machine.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
because
Nice.
the cases,
Yeah.
the old cases are breaking or
Of
yellowing,
course they are. Oh, totally are.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
Oh,
Huh.
this summer, I know I'm going to take a bunch of things, like Vic 20 and other things that are yellowed, and I'm going to put them in the sun. Maybe for about a month. It's amazing how they clear up. I don't do the chemicals. I let Mother Nature do the magic.
There you go.
I would like to close out by reading a poem by Dr. Obsoleto dedicated to the pet. And Dave Murray. Oh, pet, you're my first true friend. With your gray screen and your blinking end, your basic commands were simple and clear.
Lovely.
I typed in my code and you'd appear. The keys were so noisy, the screen so bright. You taught me to program, to code day and night. Your disk drive was slow, but we didn't mind. For in the text world, I was always inclined. The graphics were simple, the sound was a squeak. But you were in my gateway, the path that I seek. Now you're obsolete, just a relic of old. Yet the memories of you I still fondly hold. So here's to you, dear pet, so true. A machine so ahead of its time, through and through. Though other computers may come and go, your legacy lives on and continues to grow.
Amen.
Beautiful.
Amen. I
That's
close
great.
this meeting
Great
now.
way to end.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave,
Oh,
Richard, everybody else who
no,
came.
no problem.